Sorry for the long intro. I just exited out of all the tabs I had open that were very important. So I have to set it all back up real quick. Just give me one moment. Just one more song. Just to duplicate that. All right, I got that set up. Just one more thing. All right, just one more song. I'm just half a song. Just gotta test the chat now. The multi-chat. Oh, come on. Test it now. I didn't see anything.
Be like, how come you're not famous yet? I'd be like, you didn't share my shit. How come you didn't share it yet? That's how that's what I'm saying.
All right, I think it's ready. The Facebook didn't work. Facebook. I did it, but it didn't work. I see it there, but I don't see it on my end, but it's whatever. No one's here, it's all right. All right, last test. All right, everything but Facebook, fuck it. We don't care. We're going in. All right, enjoy.
Essence of Lizyra. Mirror's Edge, Volume 1. First edition 2026. Copyright 2026 by Joshua Adam Stevens. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means without written permission from the author. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or locales is entirely coincidental. ISBN 9798398829112. Printed in the United States of America. For my siblings and anyone who ever picked up a stick and pretended it was anything else. Also by Joshua Adam Stevens. Beautiful Oblivion. Bite of the Demon. Disastrous. Dreamscape. Electro Night. Orion Express. Sensei might be an assassin. To be the last ones standing. Prologue. SND/Lizyra/1/Y997/6th Age, Dusk Tide. S. Shadows twisted and leapt across the narrow cave walls, cast by the frantic sputtering of a lone torch. In the dim, stifling passageway, a tall man clad in a battered brown gambeson drove his steel longsword through a snarling goblin's skull. The blade pierced clean through bone with a wet, splintering crunch, and the goblin collapsed in a lifeless heap. An ash-black sword and shield fell from its limp fingers, their edges catching a faint red sheen while the rest of the metal devoured the torchlight. Without hesitation, a shorter figure swathed in a soot-stained black cloak rushed forward. His hood obscured most of his face, but the greedy gleam in his eyes was unmistakable. He dropped to one knee beside the corpse and rifled through the goblin's blood-soaked garments with deft, impatient fingers, the torch bobbing dangerously close in his free hand. "Damn it," the cloaked man muttered, his voice tight with disappointment. "No keys. Not even a half-rotten coin purse." Behind him, the taller man shifted his grip on the blood-slicked longsword and cleared his throat, the sound echoing uncomfortably in the narrow passage. When he spoke, his voice carried a wary edge of irritation. "You do realize it's madness to chase rumors this deep into Gloomshot's abandoned mithril mines?" he asked. "All this, for a couple of chests goblins might have dragged down here." The cloaked man turned sharply. His hood sank low, swallowing his face in shadow save for the torchlight caught in his eyes. "Relax, Reuben," he said, his voice calm and firm. "So long as you drank the potion I gave you, you should be free of the miasma's influence." From beneath his cloak, he produced a small golden pocket watch suspended from a chain. Flipping the lid open with his thumb, he glanced across the face before adding, "We have at least 3 more hours left. That should give us plenty of time." With a snap, the watch closed. He slipped it back into an inner pocket, then turned to the corpse and stripped away its remaining weapons before wrenching the armor loose with a grunt. Testing the bundle's weight made his arms dip slightly farther than he liked, and irritation crossed his face. "Too heavy to haul around right now," he muttered. Retracing his steps a short distance, he hauled the gear to a corner choked with debris. Beneath a crude mound of shattered timber and rubble, he concealed the bundle from sight. Straightening slowly, he spared the hiding place one final glance. "We'll collect it on our way out," he said confidently. "Would be a shame to leave such loot behind." The torch extended into the dark as he searched the gloom ahead. When he spoke again, his voice had thinned to a hush, sharpened by something near fevered anticipation. "I'm telling you, this is no ordinary plunder. Something about it reeks of value. You heard the barmaid yourself, noble caravans vanishing along the forest routes without a trace. And the wagons rotting at the mine's entrance looked expensive enough." He chuckled under his breath and said, "There's wealth below us, Reuben. Real wealth." Reuben tightened his grip on the sword and cast a wary glance into the thickening dark ahead. "It's not the miasma that concerns me, Maxwell," he said. "These goblins are better armed than the usual filth we cut down. I don't like pushing this deep without a full party." Stepping past his companion and taking the lead, he added, "Especially without a healer at our backs." Maxwell followed, his cloak whispering behind him as he said reassuringly, "Calm yourself. I brought enough potions and antidotes to quell a brewing plague." Swiping back his cloak, he revealed a pouch bulging at his hip. And if something grotesque does crawl out of the dark. The sentence died there as a grin curled beneath the shadow of his hood. We've got these. From the pouch, he drew a small vial and raised it toward the torchlight. The liquid within shimmered faintly, then vanished as the glass caught the glow at a different angle. Invisibility potions, he continued. The good kind. Even supposed to mend any wounds while you're cloaked as well. With a shrug, he tucked the vial away. Cost me a fortune, but should be worth every coin. Besides. His grin widened as he glanced back. Why split the loot 6 ways when we can just split it between the two of us? Almost slowing his pace to a halt, Reuben shot him a disapproving glance from over his shoulder. A fortune, he asked. From where did you obtain such a draft? Especially one bearing dual enchantments? And don't tell me you bought it from Glacis Concoctions. I'm not dying down here because you let them bleed you dry. Maxwell didn't answer, letting his chuckle soften into a sigh. Frowning, clearly unhappy with the silence, Reuben turned back toward the dark and pressed on, his footsteps echoing as the torchlight struggled to keep the shifting shadows at bay. The miasma, once a faint violet haze clinging to the stone floor, had thickened into a heavy, slithering fog. It coiled around their boots and crept up their legs like writhing tendrils. A chorus of feral goblin laughter echoed from somewhere beyond the narrow cavern walls, stretched thin and twisted by the tunnels between them. Torchlight spilled around a bend ahead, revealing a row of battered wooden doors barely clinging to their hinges. Reuben crept past the first open doorway and glanced inside. Nothing remained but a few crumbled statues scattered across the debris-littered floor. Crossing back to Maxwell, he lowered his voice. Anything of interest in that room? Maxwell peered through the doorway, answering, nothing but a heap of toppled furniture. His gaze drifted toward the rear of the chamber, where something protruded from behind a stack of crates. There's also what looks like a statue of a young hewn woman in the back. If I had to guess, she looks ready to cast a spell or something. Reuben leaned over his shoulder for a better look. After looking it over, he said, doesn't look like any god or goddess I recognize, but I wouldn't put it past a bunch of goblins to drag some stray statue down here and start worshipping it. Odd thing for them to keep, though. Studying the room a bit longer, he added, probably pillaged it from one of the wrecked wagons out front while it was in transit. With a shrug, Maxwell moved around the bend and approached the last door ahead. A half-collapsed ceiling held it partly shut. Rot had eaten deep into the planks, and cracks spider-webbed across the surface. Through the gaps, the faint torchlight flickered, illuminating nothing but rubble and ruin beyond. Maxwell crept forward and leaned cautiously around the doorframe. Amid the fallen stone and dust in the chamber's corner sat a single chest the ruin around it had somehow failed to touch. Bands of trimmed gold gleamed across its edges, vivid and unblemished as it twisted around polished turquoise magic wood. Maxwell turned back toward Reuben, his voice reduced to a hungry whisper. I might have found something. Come on. They slipped past the broken door, each footfall placed with deliberate care to avoid the crunch of loose stone and splintered wood beneath their boots. The farther they moved into the chamber, the colder the air became, pressing against their chests with every breath. Maxwell crouched in front of the chest and handed the torch back to Reuben without taking his eyes off it. He leaned in close, angling his body so his shadow wouldn't obscure the gold-etched surface, and began working methodically along the seams. His gloved fingers tested the edges, pressed gently at hidden gaps, traced the underside where a careless goblin might have cut corners while engineering any traps. I've never seen craftsmanship like this, he said under his breath as he worked, his attention never fully leaving the chest. Whatever's inside, it isn't common treasure. When he finished, he withdrew his hands and shifted back onto his heels, confidence settling into his posture as he looked up at Reuben and said, there are no triggers, no pressure plates, and no enchantments tied to any locks. If there was a trap here, I'd be dead already. Seeing as there was no keyhole, he reached out and pulled at the lid. To his surprise, the chest refused to budge. Scowling, Maxwell crouched lower and studied the chest's sides, his fingers tracing the intricate gold inlays worked into the wood. The designs resolved into dragons wreathed in flame, their bodies twisting around the chest in interlocking loops. Every scale had been etched by hand, every flame carefully formed, with a precision that bordered on obsession. A few paces away, Reuben stood watch, sword drawn, eyes sweeping the darkness beyond the torchlight. After a moment, he muttered quietly. The emblem on that chest, it's from Enos. The Fallen Kingdom. Maxwell glanced back, but Reuben wasn't looking at him. My father served there before it fell, Reuben continued, his voice lower now. I used to see that symbol on the banners, on the palace guards' shields. From beneath his hood, Maxwell's eyes gleamed at the implication. So, you're saying this ain't just some noble's wealth? His grin widened while he let the words roll across his lips. This could be royal treasure. For the first time, a spark of excitement broke through Reuben's usual caution while he replied, exactly. Maxwell turned back to the chest, running his hands reverently along its carvings. Half smiling despite himself, Reuben added, there was a bakery just outside the castle walls. Run by a fox demi-hume with snow-white hair and fur. She used to sneak my brother and me these icing-topped pastries whenever our father was drilling with the knights. His gaze drifted, lost somewhere in the memory. Haven't tasted anything like them since. Snorting impatiently, Maxwell commanded. Memory lane can wait. Bring the light over here, I can't bloody see, you cunt. Sorry, Reuben muttered, adjusting the torch while the light drove away the shadows. That emblem just brought it all back. Before Maxwell could turn back to the chest, a sudden, blinding pain tore through his left arm. A wet, nauseating crunch split the air. Maxwell's eyes went wide as he looked down. His elbow was simply gone, severed as if shorn away by monstrous rusted shears. Blood erupted from the ragged stump in violent, rhythmic spurts, splashing across the rubble-strewn floor. His scream ripped through the stale cavern, a shrill, desperate cry that ricocheted wildly off the cold stone walls. The chest he had been kneeling before now gaped open with obscene hunger. From within, dagger-long teeth glistened, slick with thick, blackened saliva that hissed softly when it struck the ground. A tongue made from writhing worm-like tendrils, twitched and coiled in eager anticipation. Staggering backward, Maxwell clutched the ruin of his arm. He then fumbled beneath his cloak, his fingers slick with blood as they frantically searched for his weapon. Trembling with fear, his grip slipped off from his dagger's hilt, sending his pouch of potions spilling loose as glass shattered across the stone floor. Seizing the opportunity, the thing lunged. Its wooden body snapped open wider than any natural thing should, then clamped its jaws down around his head with a sickening, bone-crushing crack. Reuben watched in mute horror as his friend's headless body stumbled backward, blood erupting in wild jets from the shredded ruin of his neck. Flailing its arm and stump about, the corpse spasmed violently before collapsing onto the blood-slick stone. Shuddering as if it hadn't feasted in ages, the chest leapt across the room, landing upon Maxwell's body. And without prayer or thanks to any of the gods, it began gorging upon its freshly earned meal. Chunks of flesh and splintered bone were spat from its maw, raining down with meaty slaps. Within the symphony of gore-harmonized slurps, one of Maxwell's fingers skittered across the floor, accompanied by his blood-covered pocket watch as it came rolling to a stop at Reuben's feet. Once satisfied, the thing paused before slowly turning its blood-soaked maw toward Reuben. Its body snapping and groaning in the gloom while he watched in terror. Before the thing could strike, Reuben leveled his long sword and charged. Between its irregular snapping bites, he lunged for the eye beneath the lid. With a deafening crack, the blade shattered against its jagged, gore-slick teeth. Reeling, Reuben dropped the hilt and reached for his short sword, but something slithered around his ankles. A glistening tentacle-like appendage coiled tight and yanked him off his feet. The breath tore from his lungs as he slammed into the stone. Clawing at the floor, he tried to push himself up. And saw his legs. Or where his legs should have been. Nothing remained below the thigh but bloody, ragged stumps. Pumping out torrents of blood in horrific fountains with each agonizing heartbeat. Reuben gasped as the world tilted violently around him. Pain unlike anything he had ever known tore through his nerves, lighting his spine on fire. The creature closed in, lid snapping open and shut, maw dripping with black ichor. Its tendrilled tongue lashed out and latched onto him, dragging him closer. He kicked with what remained of his legs. He clawed at the stone. He screamed. It was futile. The jaws opened wide, revealing rows upon rows of serrated, dripping teeth. As the tendrils hoisted him upward, Reuben caught one last glimpse of Maxwell's mutilated torso from within, already half digested. Then the darkness swallowed him. Crunching. Grinding. Pulverizing. Slick warmth washed over his body as the gnashing grew louder, reverberating through his hollowing chest. Reuben howled, the sound pitiful and broken, smothered deep within the beast's gaping maw, only escaping when its jaws parted between bites. As if savoring every morsel, it chewed with deliberate, torturous slowness, grinding through bone and tendon, relishing every fiber it stripped away. The crunch of splintering ribs and the wet tear of muscle being ripped from bone echoed in grotesque unison against the cavern walls. The sound grew deafening, drowning even Reuben's hoarse screams as his body was gradually unmade. Madness gnawed at the edges of his mind. His broken limbs twitched with dying spasms as blood loss leached the warmth from his skin. The world narrowed into a collapsing tunnel rimmed with crimson light. The torch, still sputtering weakly nearby, lay in a spreading pool of blood. Its light rippled across the puddle, painting the walls with shifting, grotesque shadows. One final gout of blood splashed across the flame. The torch sputtered once. Twice. Then choked out completely. The cavern was swallowed by a suffocating, perfect darkness. The chest sat silently once more in its corner. Still. Patient. As though it had never moved at all. Chapter 1.
So that was the prologue. That was like the 9th draft, so I really don't think it needs any more changes as of right now, at least for the demo print. But next is chapter 1, and there were a few things in here I wanted to change the last time I had gone through, and I should have wrote them down, but I just have to listen to it again, and then I will make those changes. So after some music, we'll play it. The song you'll hear before every chapter and after are the songs that'll be in the audiobook version on YouTube that you can listen to for free. There already are audiobook versions on YouTube for the first few chapters, but they're like 3 or 4 years old and very outdated now. So until I actually get the first volume published, which hopefully should be by the end of the month, if not sooner, hopefully, on Amazon Kindle. Then I'll go back and finish all the audio episodes, update them, read them myself instead of the shitty AI voice, and then go back to DayZ, you know, for a while. All right. Setting up the chapter. I have the paperback print being read aloud, but then I have the non-paperback version on the right being edited. Of course, my display capture is always fucked up when I turn it on. This is what it looks like. On the left, the paperback. On the right, the other version. So I can edit it and then swap it over. Alright, there we go. Put that back. Turn display capture off. Bam. Lock the dock. Alright, I think everything's set up and ready to go.
Chapter 1. A Mage's Melancholy. Rosai / Lizyra / 3rd / Y997 / 6th age, Midsol. F. Ugh, exclaimed a young mage, her voice echoing through the trees as she paced back and forth beneath the forest canopy, her boots chewing up the soft earth with every aggravated step. Concealed among the dense forest foliage, she skulked along a narrow pathway lining the winding cobblestone road nearby. She continued her restless march, still muttering profanities under her breath. Grass bent and snapped beneath her heels, pressed flat into a newly trampled trail nearly 7 feet long that branched away from the road like a wound splitting open. Each sharp pivot at the end of her self-made trail sent her cloak's cape snapping behind her while the tip of her wide-brimmed hat swung violently. She stopped, spun, and barked into the empty woods. "Stop right there, you criminal." The words barely left her mouth before her face twisted in horror. No, she muttered, squeezing her eyes shut. That sounded corny as hell. In one fist she gripped a long wooden staff, that was taller than she was, its crown set with a raw, uncut amethyst that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly violet sheen. In her other hand, she clenched a smaller, less imposing, wooden wand. Behind her, hovering silently at waist height, drifted a closed grimoire. Its leather cover was stitched in gold thread and studded with carefully embedded jewels, the sigils etched into it faintly glowing as if impatient to be opened. You, she shouted suddenly, pointing at absolutely nothing. Her voice took on a strained, theatrical dread, as if she were an imperial guard catching a naked intruder sneaking through the royal bedchamber in the dead of night, one who might have been invited there by the queen herself while the emperor was conveniently out of town for the weekend. Her stomach lurched as the mental image struck her a heartbeat later. Revulsion climbed her throat mid-thaw, forcing a sharp gag out of her before she could stop it. She lurched forward, clapping a hand over her mouth, wand and all, and dry heaved violently, the sound echoing far louder than she'd intended. She wiped a glob of spit, conjured with only the noise of her retching as an incantation, onto a worn and faded black and green laced tunic beneath her cloak as she frantically resumed pacing. Nearby birds exploded out of a bush in a flurry of wings as she whirled and jabbed her staff toward the foliage. "Hey there, bucko," she called. "You've got the little guy tucked away somewhere in there, don't ya?" She laughed once high and brittle, then winced. "No," she whispered to herself. "That sounds like I'm either talking about his cock or hitting on him." With a sharp cry, she repeatedly began slamming her staff against the nearest tree. "Why is it so hard to think of something clever to say to this asshole?" she snapped at the forest. "If I say return what rightfully belongs to me, or I believe you're in possession of something that isn't yours, it just sounds so contrived." A voice answered from the bushes behind her. "Why does it matter if it sounds contrived or what he thinks at all, Lizyra?" She spun so fast her cloak and skirt of her tunic flared wide. "Shut up, chump," she hollered. A man stepped partway out of the brush, leaves clinging to his wavy brown hair. Lizyra jabbed a finger at him. "Your solution was to leap out of the bushes, ambush them, chop off their hands, and sell their belongings to black market merchants." She turned away with a sharp huff. "I told you I'd do this myself. Without violence." "Violence? So, get back in the damn bushes and be quiet, you barbarian." The man began to climb back into the bushes as he sassied back, so politely asking them to give back what they stole and walking away without roughing them up, just excuses their crimes. Lizyra shot him a murderous glare. "Isaac, I swear on all the gods," she hissed, "if you don't get back into those bushes and shut your trap, I'm going to turn you into a tree for the time being." Isaac stiffened at the threat, his shoulders locking as a familiar knot of dread tightened in his gut. Being turned into a tree was not an experience he was eager to repeat, especially not by a spell Lizyra had only recently learned and absolutely had not mastered. The last time had left him nauseous for days, sap leaking from places sap had no business leaking from. The odds of something going catastrophically wrong were uncomfortably high. He disappeared back into the bushes without another word. As Isaac finished worming his way back into the brush, the distant groan of wagon wheels grinding against dirt and cobblestone rolled through the forest. Their heavy and rhythmic sound echoed between the trees, announcing the approach of a small caravan making its way down the road. Lizyra eased closer to the foliage lining the path and parted the leaves just enough to peer through. 3 wagons came into view, each medium-sized and identical closed-top coaches pulled by teams of 4 horses apiece. Their wheels were larger than normal, reinforced with thick steel fittings that caught the light as they turned. Reinforced panels of black dragon steel lined each wagon's hull, suggesting their occupants might be more military than casual thieves hiding in plain sight. "Well," Isaac whispered sharply from somewhere inside his leafy hiding place. "Is it them?" Without taking her eyes off the wagons, Lizyra replied flatly, "I haven't seen a weeping willow in a while." Isaac's hand closed around the low-grade anti-magic potion hanging from his belt. His thumb brushed the cork as he wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, his thoughts turning to whether the potion was still viable or long past its usefulness. The vial had been sitting in one of his equipment chests for longer than he liked, untouched, unused until Lizyra had started dabbling in transfiguration spells right before their current expedition. In theory, the magic was non-lethal when cast properly. In practice, Isaac had learned not to trust theory. He had also learned not to trust expiration dates. The last time he had tried to counter one of Lizyra's rage-fueled punishments, the anti-magic potions he carried had been long expired despite what the label claimed. When he hurled one directly into the fire bolt she had cast his way, it didn't cancel the spell. Instead, the magic warped, collapsing into a corrosive slime that splattered across him and ate through his clothing. Even when they weren't expired, the taste was something he never looked forward to. Potions brewed through magical expertise usually carried little to no flavor at all. Isaac had learned, time and time again, that the same concoctions produced through alchemical science always tasted foul but usually were cheaper. Cheap enough to drink habitually, at least. Especially back when Lizyra had been learning sleep and confusion spells. "It's not them," Lizyra said as the wagons rolled past, her voice edged with disappointment. She turned away and resumed pacing along her self-made path, boots grinding softly through the flattened grass. A sudden sting flared against her leg. She halted mid-step and glanced down, finding a small tear in the black leggings she wore beneath her tunic, just above her left knee. With a quiet hiss of irritation, she slid the wand from her hand into a small holster at her belt and brushed her fingers over the spot. "Damn it," she muttered aloud. "I just bought these. Now I'll have to buy another pair." Isaac considered offering to mend them, but wisely decided against it. The risk of becoming shrubbery or being forced to choke down a possibly expired anti-magic potion far outweighed the courtesy. Lizyra leaned her staff against the tree she had molested earlier and stepped out of her boots. She bent over and began tugging the leggings down. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Isaac shouted. She froze, hunched over, the leggings pooled around her ankles. "What?" she said, glancing back at him. "I'm not about to confront someone while wearing ripped leggings and looking like a street-ridden wench." "You're not going to look tough at all with no pants on," Isaac snapped. She snorted. "Yeah, well, you're not going to look tough with your branches swaying in the breeze either, so shut the hell up." She peeled the leggings the rest of the way off, stuffed them into a satchel hidden beneath her cloak, and slipped her boots back on. Clearing her throat, she straightened and added, "Besides, leggings don't count as pants. I'm still wearing a tunic." Tunic. Another set of wagons creaked into view as Lizyra spun around and peered through the narrow opening she had hacked into the brush. She squinted for barely a heartbeat before stiffening. "It's them." Panic seized her. She lunged for her satchel, yanking out her leggings and trying to shove her legs back into them without bothering to remove her boots. The fabric caught, twisted, and refused to cooperate. She lost her balance and toppled sideways, rolling across the dirt as she wrestled desperately with the stubborn garment. Isaac shook his head and turned away. From his angle, he could now see far more up her tunic than he wanted to. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Just let me kill them and get this over with." Still tangled in her leggings, Lizyra barked back, "No. What is it with you and wanting to kill everyone?"
I want to help.
"It's called being realistic," Isaac shot back without hesitation. "They're not just going to hand Knox over and then politely forget his existence. They'll report him to the nearest garrison the moment they reach town." Lizyra mimicked his voice in a sharp, exaggerated whine. As she arched her back up off the ground in an indecent and unintentionally seductive manner, she attempted one last time to pull her leggings up before standing. As she tugged at them, they yielded to her insistent grasp, but not without a teasing resistance, causing her to pull harder. Within a forceful yank, they gave way, tearing apart unexpectedly. In the midst of her unintentional yet intimate struggle, one of her hands, still grasping a piece of her torn leggings, flew up and inadvertently struck her in the face. Her back unarched as she crashed into the ground, causing the skirt of her tunic to flutter up onto her stomach, revealing her undergarments. Still sprawled across the forest floor and exposed, she groaned in agony as Isaac rose to his feet, drawing his dragon steel longsword from its sheath upon his back. His voice resounded with indignation as he proclaimed, "Enough of this nonsense. You can't even pull your damn pants up. Convince these miscreants to surrender Knox peacefully? Yeah, fucking right." As Isaac emerged from the brush, Lizyra rolled onto her side, clutching her wand again tightly. With a fervent incantation, she invoked, Alakid and Arborum Transformer. A surge of mystical energy enveloped Isaac, and a sensation akin to a lightning strike seized him. Roots erupted from his feet, anchoring him to the planet below. Bark split through his skin, hardening and fusing into a thick, broad, and resilient tree trunk. Each one of his limbs stiffened, reshaped, and locked in place. His hair elongated and twisted into long, drooping branches, leaves unfurling and cascading downward like the sorrowful fronds of a weeping willow. In seconds, Isaac was no longer a man. He was a tree. Still armored. Still furious. Entirely immobile. Rising to her feet, her attire still revealing more than intended, she awkwardly stumbled over to Isaac. With another painful groan, she wiped the blood from her nose and shoved her ripped leggings into the hole in Isaac's trunk where his mouth would later be. "I told you, doofus," she muttered, leaning close, "I'd handle this peacefully." She hesitated, then added, "But since you're so concerned about my pants, you can hold on to these for me." With a graceful sweep, she adjusted her tunic, brushing away the clinging mirth from her garments as she firmly clasped her staff from its resting place. Drawing in a deep breath, she slid her wand into its holster, then reached out to claim the grimoire, which had still been lingering beside her. Stepping forth from the shadows of the bushes, she ventured onto the road with a confidence that was more pragmatic than alluring. Lizyra, draped in her worn and faded tunic, her form accidentally accentuated by the billowing black cloak that tantalizingly danced around her body, halted in the middle of the road while the dust swirled around her boots like a bewitching aura. As the carriages drew nearer, she turned with a sultry sway of her hips toward them, causing her hat and cape to flutter in the breeze. Her tunic billowed up once again, revealing her panties to the horses as they slowly came to a stop in front of her. She vehemently exclaimed, "By the gods, what sorcery plagues these accursed garments?" as she awkwardly attempted to push her skirt back down with both her hands still occupied. Fumbling with the skirt of her tunic, her silverish purple hair frolicked in the wind behind her while she began mumbling under her breath to herself. From the carriage emerged a man, his voice booming, "Young lass, are you tempting fate or merely seeking to entertain me with an impromptu spectacle?" Lizyra paused in her adjustment, though her eloquent black and red laced panties were still exposed, fixing her gaze on the man as he continued, "Consider yourself fortunate that these steeds halted their advance, for it was not my command. Normally, they would have disregarded such nuisances." The man, tall and thin, bore a meticulously groomed thick, slick, and pointy mustache and beard. His attire was opulent, adorned with multiple large, gold, jewel-encrusted necklaces, and jeweled rings on each finger. Her concern heightened upon noticing the rapier dangling from his belt alongside a pouch of coins. Growing increasingly agitated, he persisted, "Hey. Are you even listening? If you don't speak up, we'll run you over." With a dismissive wave, after another moment of silence, he turned to retreat into the carriage. Lizyra nervously blurted out, "Give him back. You snatched him away like a sleazebag, and I demand his immediate return." The man pivoted back to face her, retorting, "Young miss, we're not involved in hume or demi-hume trafficking. It's simply not our modus operandi. Now, kindly step aside before you meet the unfortunate fate of being trampled by our horses." Pointing her staff at him, Lizyra's tunic finally resettled, properly covering her, as she declared, "My name isn't Young Miss, and my companion wasn't a hume or demi-hume. He's the dragon you've caged and concealed in one of your carriages." The man chuckled and said, "Oh, is that so? Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but you must have gotten us confused with somebody else. I haven't seen a dragon in years. Probably about 10 years to be honest. You know when that piss-poor kingdom to the north got invaded by the Empire and slaughtered those dragon-loving bastards." His laughter echoed, joined by the amusement of those still within the carriages. "In the name of decency, remove yourself from the thoroughfare, you impudent wretch, or suffer the fate of flattened vermin," the man sneered, as he turned once more to board his carriage. Lizyra cast her eyes downward, whispering, "I warned you." With a deliberate release, the grimoire slipped from her grasp, hovering in midair where she released it. Clutching her staff with both hands, she stood resolute as the man wheeled around to confront her upon hearing her begin an incantation. Under her breath she muttered, "Velum fumi." The end of her staff slowly began to spark as if someone were using it like a striking rod. Smoke furiously fumed from its end, slowly permeating the surrounding area. Upon beholding the levitating tome beside her and the clouds of smoke, his amusement got the best of him as the man erupted into mocking laughter. "What manner of trickery is this?" he jeered, pointing and laughing scornfully. "Some feeble attempt at sorcery, perhaps? Is this pitiful display meant to amuse me?" As he ridiculed her, she began another incantation as the amethyst at the tip of her wooden staff began to emit a vibrant red glow, accompanied by an ominous gathering of energy. Despite the sun's radiant dawn-tide beams, the lingering clouds of smoke swirled around the vicinity, seamlessly expanding, shrouding the carriages and the area in a thick luminous veil of smog. While the pulsating lights around the amethyst at the end of her staff reached their climax, Lizyra's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, "Ignis Fulmen." A colossal bolt of crimson flame erupted out in front of her, hurtling forth to consume the first two carriages in the convoy. Their charred remains cascaded to the ground like ash-laden snow, though the horses pulling them remained unscathed, leaving the man gaping at her in abject terror. Though he attempted to speak, his voice failed him, lost amid the chaos unleashed by her infernal display. "Well, it seems he wasn't in those first two," Lizyra remarked coolly, adjusting her aim to the next carriages in line. "Are you out of your mind?" the man finally erupted, his voice trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. He knew full well that there were no passengers in the first two carriages besides himself, as they housed his precious hoard of gold and treasures. He had been diligently counting his riches until Lizyra's unexpected interruption. "You've just slain some of my men. And by the gods, you'll bring about the demise of your dragon as well with such reckless behavior." Lizyra's serious countenance melted into a satisfied smile as she retorted, "Ah, so you do possess my dragon after all. And those carriages were devoid of souls, else the soul arcanics embedded in my staff would have claimed them, an outcome I do not witness. Therefore, sir, you stand exposed as both a liar and a thief." With a pointed gesture of her staff, the man cowered in fear, his bravado extinguished in the face of her undeniable power. After retreating a few paces to compose himself, he bellowed, "Men, seize this insolent witch bitch immediately." Drawing his rapier, he gestured to his cohorts, who emerged from their carriages wielding crossbows. "Take aim," he commanded, and a volley of bolts soared through the air towards Lizyra. With her staff raised high, she cried out, "Velum Ignis!" A swirling cloak of flames enveloped her, incinerating all the bolts hurtling her way. Then, with a swift arc of her staff, a colossal orb of crackling electricity surged forth, accompanied by her command, "Fulgur Katina." The massive lightning bolt zigzagged toward the men with crossbows, electrocuting them momentarily before they crumpled to the ground, groaning in unison. Two men clad head to toe in full plate armor emerged from the second-to-last wagon. They were nearly as tall as the coach itself, their movements slow and deliberate beneath the weight of steel. Each bore a long sword at his side and a broad kite shield locked to one arm. Engraved at the center of each shield was the same emblem, a dragon being pierced through the heart by a sword. Fog curled around their greaves and climbed their armor like grasping fingers, yet neither man hesitated. They strode forward, passing their incapacitated comrades without so much as a glance. One of them leveled his sword at Lizyra. "This is your final warning," he said evenly. "Lay down your weapons and surrender. Do that, and we promise to take turns instead of all of us having you at once when we have you in restraints." The second knight raised his sword to speak. And suddenly his breath was ripped from him. Sharp cracks burst overhead like snapping firecrackers, echoing through the fog-choked road. A fine, pollen-like dust drifted down in a lazy spiral, coating armor, shields, and steel alike as Lizyra completed her incantation. The thought had been festering in the back of his mind for a long time. Even before they had captured the dragon. Everything he had built, everything he had been stripped away. Reduced to working alongside thugs just to survive. Once a dragon slayer, now a dragon napper, hired by some gutless lowlife too frightened to risk his own skin, too greedy to share the reward with his actual party. Pathetic. But more pathetic still was the man beside him. A man he had called a brother. A man he had bled for. A man he had marched beside from dawntide to dusktide, slept beside in cells so foul they barely qualified as shelter, shared coin and misery and loss with year after year. Not the sorry sap who had hired him. No. the man who was standing by his side pretending to be his ally. Turning slowly toward his comrade, his eyes glassy with unnatural mirth, one of the knights raised his sword. "After all these years," he said, voice thick with false warmth, "cutting down foe after foe, rotting together in what might as well have been the shit-stained prison cells lingering beneath the capital, all the while you were right there under my nose." He kept his blade pointed directly at the other man. "I know it was you that fucked my wife." On any other day, he would have recognized it for what it was. A lie. A trick. A spell. But not today. The accused knight turned his sword toward his friend, the metal trembling faintly in his grip. He knew he had never touched the man's wife. He knew he had never touched any man's wife. He knew, God's help him, that he had never touched a woman in his entire life. And yet, despite knowing himself, despite knowing the man standing before him better than anyone alive, the words still crawled out of his mouth, low and venomous. "And I can't wait to fuck her again." The response was not a roar of battle, but a shrill, muffled moan of rage trapped beneath his great helm as the accuser lunged forward, thrusting his long sword at the other man's breastplate. The accused swatted the incoming blade aside with his shield and surged forward, his own sword slamming against the other man's raised defense. Sparks burst across their armor as they collided again and again, their blows ringing through the fog. From where she stood, Lizyra's heart hammered in her chest. "No, wait," she shouted. "Please. This isn't what I intended." Her voice vanished beneath the clash of steel. Turning sharply, the man wielding the rapier barked over the noise, "Stop this at once, you imbeciles. Your enemy is standing right over there." They did not hear him. Or they didn't care. Sparks danced as shields and blades collided, the two knights locked in a furious exchange, blind to everything but each other. "Fools," their employer whispered between clenched teeth while reaching for something within his vest. A gunshot ripped through the fog, quickly followed by a second that cracked so close behind it the echoes nearly overlapped. Both men stiffened mid-motion, their bodies locking in place as though the will to move had been ripped from them outright. Blood first seeped through the seams of their armor, then poured freely, pooling at their feet before their legs finally gave out. They toppled backward and struck the ground with a dull, surreal thud as the fog pressed in around them, swallowing their fallen forms while the echoes of the shots faded into the trees. The man lowered his smoking flintlock and slid it back into its holster. Reaching for a second pistol, he turned toward Lizyra. "I don't know what curse you laid upon them," he said coldly, "but you won't bespell me with your witchery." Almost in tears, Lizyra spun toward the man and leveled her staff directly at his pointed goatee, then bellowed, "Glacies carcerum." A frigid gale burst from the amethyst crowning her staff, erupting outward in a screaming wave of cold. Frost swallowed the air around him in an instant, crawling across his armor and clothes like a living thing. As he reached for a smaller pistol hidden within the secret lining of his tunic, the ice surged faster, snaking up his arm, locking his joints, tightening like an unseen hand adjusting its grip. Before he could even draw his next breath, a spire of ice erupted around him, sealing him in place. Trapped within the crystalline prison, he shot her a wide, disbelieving look, his fingers frozen inches from the weapon's grip. His gaze flicked sideways as something shifted in the haze of drifting smoke. Just beyond the fog's edge, a tree shorter than the rest suddenly unraveled. Bark split and peeled away as wood softened into flesh. Branches collapsed inward, reforming into a cloaked male human who crumpled wordlessly into the brush lining the road. The man's eyes snapped back to Lizyra as she was already making her way toward him, her boots crunching softly against the now frost-slick road. Panic flickered across his face, but it faded almost immediately as darkness took him before she ever reached his icy prison. Standing before the frozen figure, she lifted her staff and struck the ice once with its end. The impact drove a violent fracture through the crystalline shell, splintering it apart as the man fell to the ground below unharmed, but utterly unconscious. As she approached the next carriage, her grimoire drifted faithfully at her side, hovering in the air as though guided by an unseen tether. She bit her lower lip as she passed the fallen knights. Each helmet bore a perfectly placed hole, small and precise, still leaking blood that pooled beneath their heads. Knowing they were both most likely past the point of being saved by a healing remedy or potion, she continued on to the next wagon. Cracking open the carriage door, she peered inside. Several men huddled together within, faces pale and twisted with terror, shielding their eyes as though her gaze itself might burn them. Lizyra forced a nervous smile, shut the door, and moved on. Her heart pounded as she reached the next wagon. If the man had been bluffing, if the dragon wasn't here, then Nox had already been turned over to monster hunters, or worse, to the Empire. She inhaled deeply, seized the handle, and tore the door open. Inside stood a colossal cage trimmed in silver and gold, its bars etched with magic-suppressing runes and talismans that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Imprisoned within was an adolescent black dragon. A heavy muzzle clamped its snout shut while dragon steel chains bound its body, pinning its wings and limbs in cruel restraint. Unlike the large fortress-like caravan wagons Lizyra was used to, this one was unpleasantly small. In her eyes, it was offensively cramped for a growing black dragon. Even the rear loading bay looked barely wide enough to accommodate an average-sized troll. With a sense of triumph, she exclaimed, "Found you." With a burst of movement, Lizyra vaulted from the doorway onto the cage, landing lightly atop the reinforced bars. She secured her staff in its holster beneath her cloak on her back and drew her wand as she knelt beside the prison. The grimoire snapped neatly into her grasp, and she flipped through its pages with frantic speed before stopping short. "Oh. Right," she muttered to herself. "How could I forget?" She pressed the tip of her wand against one of the cage bars and spoke the incantation aloud. Dispellera. The silver and gold runes dulled at once, their glow flickering before collapsing entirely. Talismans tarnished, cracked, and crumbled into dust, their suppressive magic unraveling in seconds. Lizyra rose to her feet and raised her wand again, her voice steadier this time. Euro. The bars flared to a molten crimson, heat rippling through the confined air, before sublimating into curling wisps of smoke and vanishing completely. She released the grimoire, allowing it to float once more at her side, and moved quickly, undoing the straps of the muzzle, unhooking each dragon steel latch, freeing chain after chain as the dragon beneath her began to stir. The dragon, who almost towered over the height of two full-grown men while on its hind legs, rose as high as it could while under the roof of the wagon, its gaze meeting hers with a mixture of gratitude and newfound freedom. With a gentle nuzzle against her forehead, it emitted a melodic purr, akin to the rumble of distant thunder. As its massive wings unfurled, the wagon crumbled beneath its newfound strength. Its walls exploded and collapsed over the extent allowed by its chassis and frame. Men who had been cowering inside the neighboring wagon scrambled free amid the wreckage, tripping over broken boards and spilled cargo as they fled down the road. Their panicked footsteps faded quickly, swallowed by distance and fear. With a gentle smile gracing her lips, Lizyra continued to stroke the dragon's scales, offering comfort and reassurance. "Are you all right, Noxie?" she inquired softly, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I never meant for them to kidnap you." She wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezing him hard enough to the point she would have unintentionally crushed any other animal. In response, the dragon straightened its posture, and flapped its wings with a roar that instantly cleared the surrounding smoke and fog, letting the light from the sunshine onto the carnage that lay in Lizyra's wake. From the side of the cobblestone road, Isaac emerged from the nearby brush, clad in an overstretched leather-studded vest and a shredded black cloak, his body burdened with an unnecessary array of weapons. His boots were in ruins, the leather torn so badly that his toes protruded through the ragged ends, yet he continued wearing them as if nothing were amiss. "That ordeal stretched on far too long, and I'm still fuming over your decision to transfigure me into a god's forsaken tree," Isaac grumbled, his voice carrying a weight of something that had been once covered in bark and sap. "You should have dispatched them all swiftly and put an end to it. Nox's immunity to fire would have hastened the process. And now, everything I'm wearing is practically in shambles." Wiping leaves and sap from his armor, he pointed at the two dead knights and scoffed. "What happened to these two? Don't tell me you finally grew the balls to kill someone yourself." Lizyra interjected sharply, "I had no intention of ending lives needlessly. Those two attempted to kill each other after I had cast a confusion spell on them. Then, Mr. Pointybeard shot them for not listening to him." Turning to the group of collapsed men once wielding crossbows, she said, "Those men are merely unconscious, and the others fled in cowardice. There was no such need for bloodshed over such trivial matters. Besides, I refuse to stoop to your level of brutality by killing everyone." Pointing to the man sleeping on the ground next to his rapier, Isaac asked, "And him?" Lizyra said, "I figured he was doing the most damage out of everyone, so I encased him in ice." The incantation for a sleeping spell would have taken far too long, and it looked like he was reaching for something. "I am not a killer," Isaac retorted, his tone tinged with irritation. "I take a life only in defense of mine or yours. In this circumstance, it would have been not only warranted but essential." Turning to face him, Lizyra countered firmly, "Taking a life should never be the solution, Isaac. No one deserves to perish. There are always alternatives to prevent further harm." With a scoff, Isaac responded sarcastically, "Have you suddenly become a priest preaching the holy word of Helia?" Before Lizyra could retort, he continued, "We ought to leave. Those who fled could be telling the town guard of Nox and what happened here. Plus, the others are likely growing impatient awaiting our return." The decisive stride, he made his way towards one of the horses nearby. Mounting it swiftly, he spurred the other horses into motion, urging them to depart before their masters awoke. "Theo would be proud you spared their horses." Lizyra crossed her arms. "Again, I had no intention of killing anyone or anything. Master Theo's training taught me how to channel and control the fire around them." "Thanks for noticing," she added, the words leaving her mouth with clear reluctance. As the dragon lowered itself, it was just large enough for Lizyra to climb onto its back. As she sheathed her wand and secured her grimoire, Isaac cautioned, "Stay low and avoid detection. We cannot afford the attention of any more mercenaries tailing us back to camp." Before Isaac could ride off, Lizyra queried with a hint of embarrassment, "Are you still in possession of my leggings?" She then attempted her best impression of Isaac and said with his dialect, "And might thou endeavor to mend them for me?" For some reason, her sudden taunting bashfulness slightly quelled Isaac's ire as he replied, "I dare say, not even Kitsune, with her healing spells, her restorative enchantments, alchemical expertise, surgical acumen, or divine interventions, could restore those leggings to their erstwhile splendor." For the first time that day, a hearty laugh escaped Lizyra's lips as Isaac pivoted and commanded the horse to gallop down the road, in the opposite direction away from the nearest town.
I'm gonna need to drink some coffee, so I'm gonna shit my pants if I do, though. Every time I drink coffee lately, I have felt like utterly sick hours later and just like massive diarrhea shit in my pants, so probably just get some energy water. Yeah, but that was the first chapter after the prologue, of course. And hopefully you enjoyed it. It has certainly grown over the years.
Chapter 2. An Elf's Fortunate Misfortune. Rosai/Lizyra/3/Y997/6th Age, Dusk Tide. T. He mists of the Darkwooge curled low through the dense underbrush, sliding between twisted roots and moss-choked trunks as the last light of the sun bled out behind the trees. Dusk tide stained the forest in deep oranges and bruised reds, the warped canopies catching the fading glow like smoldering embers frozen in place. Shadows stretched long and uneven across the forest floor, not yet born of night, but pulled thin by the dying day. As the sun slipped fully from view, Luna, the first moon, began to surface above the canopy, her pale blue glow seeping through torn clouds like cold breath against warm skin. Her light mingled uneasily with the lingering sunset, washing the darkwood in hues that felt wrong together, fire and frost sharing the same breath. The air carried the damp rot of fallen leaves and something older beneath it, a coppery tang that clung to the back of the throat, as if the forest itself remembered blood long after it had dried. Two figures crouched low behind a veil of thorny ferns and gnarled bramble. One was an elf, slender, blue-eyed, with wild, leaf-colored hair that spilled messily just past the nape of his neck. The other, a human, sat still as stone, his white hair like bone against the dark, his eyes hidden behind square-framed, smoke-tinted glasses. Both kept their breaths shallow as the mist curled through the undergrowth. "Do you think they know we're here?" the human murmured, barely audible above the whisper of fog through leaves. The elf didn't look at him. His voice slid back, sharp and low like the hiss of steel from a sheath. "Keep your mouth shut, Onyx. If you keep flapping your tongue, they'll be gnawing on it before dawn tide." Onyx exhaled through his nose. "They probably avoided this trail because of the stench of your coat. When was the last time you washed that thing, Osiris?" Osiris scoffed. "I bathe more than anyone in the caravan. It isn't my fault you're unaccustomed to the smell of cleanliness." Holding back a laugh, Onyx snorted, "Pampering your arse with the perfume your mother gifted you doesn't constitute as a bath, nor does it mask the smell." Osiris bit his lip. "Nor does rubbing your genitals with whatever fragrant slurry you brew for yourself." "Is that what you think I'm doing?" Onyx laughed quietly. "It's a lotion. I made it to keep my skin from drying out. Unlike elves, humans don't get to look youthful for generations, and field work ages us whether we like it or not. I don't intend on looking like an old geezer before I reach my 30s. Osiris glanced over at him. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you look as if you had recently crawled straight out of your mother's womb and never stopped suckling." Onyx tilted his head, a faint smile touching his mouth. "Why, thank you. Not like you to give compliments." "I wasn't," Osiris muttered, his gaze returning forward. Beneath Onyx's cloak, dark green worn nearly to brown, a dragon steel warhammer rested in its harness. Meticulously lined along his belt was a slew of vials and potions, ranging from restorative ointments to volatile, battle-ready chemicals. Beneath it all, a muted GI clung to his frame, its color unintentionally matching the faded cloak. "I mean," Onyx said quietly, "Theo isn't even 40 and already looks the part. Barely a generation or two older than me. So, I'll take what I can get." Osiris reached into his coat and withdrew a small pouch of silver mithril shot and began loading a long-barreled flintlock. "Theo just needs sleep and a bath. A few wrinkles don't change much. He looks no different to you or Isaac." Watching as Osiris prepped various firearms and holstered them, Onyx said, "You'd save coin if you ever tried swinging steel instead of relying on toys." "My tools cost less than your alchemical hobbies," Osiris replied flatly. "Most of, if not all of, the ingredients I use are all sourced from our expeditions and don't cost a thing," Onyx said while adjusting his glasses. "As do my weapons and ammunition. So, I'm uncertain what you're trying to get at," Osiris responded. Focusing his attention back on the road, Onyx said, "You're starting to look frail and thin. Your sister has more meat on her bones than you do is all. Relying on ranged weapons is making you soft." With heavy sarcasm, Osiris assured, "Well, don't you worry, Isaac was talking about some cross-class training when we get back to Wormspire. Everyone will be suffering together." A faint rustle above drew their attention as a petite figure dropped from the canopy, landing in a low crouch between them with barely a whisper of sound. She was an elf, noticeably shorter than Osiris, clad in a black and green cloak and matching tunic. A small dagger spun lazily around one gloved hand before she slid it back into its sheath. She pulled her hood down, and long hair brushed just past her shoulders, matching the deep emerald green of her eyes. Cutting into the conversation as though she'd been part of it the entire time, she murmured, "I'm not entirely sure what these things are. The job said wraiths, but I just watched them have a laugh, then casually turn into something that looked like a zombie hume. Maybe a ghoul." Feeling cramped, Onyx subtly shifted his seated position and glanced between the two elves. "Well, which is it, Osira? Wraiths or ghouls? Because if they're shape-shifting, that sounds closer to djinn behavior." Osiris continued sorting through several pouches of enchanted shot without looking up. "Wraiths, banshees, ghouls, spectral entities of any kind usually share weaknesses. Silver or mithril tends to work regardless, so silver mithril nitrate should do the job. He paused, then added dryly, after enough hunts, the distinctions start to blur. What matters is how you kill them. Lizyra elbowed her way fully between them. If they look like ghouls, treat them like ghouls. If they look like zombies, bash or blow their brains out. If they go spectral, hit them with nitrate and burn them. Anything else improvise. Lizyra exhaled. If these aren't actual wraiths, we should demand higher pay for false advertisement. Lizyra drove an elbow into his ribs. Oh, shut up. Common folk see a goblin and call it an ogre. Half of them can't tell species apart. That's why they lump everything together as monsters. Rubbing his side, Lizyra muttered, and when exactly are these mystery beings supposed to arrive? Lizyra reached beneath her cloak and produced a half-eaten piece of fruit. She picked several brightly colored orange, red, and purple leaves from its flesh before answering, I found this while stalking them. Figured I'd eat before the fight and gain some distance. So, it'll be a minute. Lizyra frowned. What in the hells are you doing? I dropped it on my way back, she said plainly. Didn't want to eat leaves. He recoiled. I'd rather you not eat random things you find in this forest. Lizyra took a large bite and grinned. You want some? No idea what it is, but it's good. Onyx reached out without hesitation. I'll take some if you're offering. She broke off a piece and handed it to him, biting off another for herself. Onyx ate it in a single bite and nodded. That's surprisingly good. Lizyra pinched the bridge of his nose. Can you two curb your appetites and stop eating things that dangle in front of your faces? For all you know, she just handed you poison. Mother always said she didn't know her left from her right, so don't blame anyone but yourselves when you're hugging the toilets. Lizyra's ears twitched as she punched him in the chest, her voice dropping to an offended hiss. Mother never said that. Their argument died abruptly as two figures materialized in the mist beyond the path, ghostly silhouettes gliding without sound, their movements more fluid than flesh. Tattered cloaks dragged across the forest floor, their scythes blackened and humming with malevolent energy, like rusted bells in a cursed church. Without a word, Lizyra vanished back up into the trees, her body dissolving into the branches above. Onyx reached for a thick vial at his side, its glass cold to the touch. With a fluid motion, he hurled it skyward. Before gravity could claim it, a sharp crack shattered the silence. A single gunshot from Osiris's flintlock burst the vial midair. The mist ignited in radiant blue flame as holy water mixed with silver mithril nitrate rained down over the path. The wraiths screamed a sound not meant for mortal ears. Their cloaks writhed like dying serpents as smoke erupted from their translucent forms. Ethereal skin blistered where the sacred droplets struck. From the underbrush, Onyx stepped forth. The flames cast dancing shadows over his frame as he rested his warhammer on his shoulder with casual menace. Come then, cursed souls, he called out. Let me return you to Infernalis where you shall be cleansed and reborn anew. The creatures halted, briefly, their heads tilting in eerie synchronization. One drifted forward, its voice a hollow whisper that echoed like wind through a crypt. Foolish mortal! Do you think sanctified water will save you from what lurks beyond death? The second hissed in tandem, their voices overlapping. We are not merely dead, we are what death fears. And you are merely meat, wearing bravery like armor. The mist thickened behind them. Trees groaned as if the forest itself recoiled from their presence. Somewhere above, a low creaking signaled Lizyra drawing the bowstring of her recurved bow, and behind the veil of foliage, Osiris silently loaded another coated enchanted round into his flintlock. The wraiths began to glide forward again, closer, slower, almost savoring the moment. But Onyx didn't wait. Undeterred by the looming threat, Onyx surged forward from the tree lean, his muscles coiling while he shuffled his weapon more like a javelin than one meant for blunt attacks. With a roar, he hurled his warhammer. The mass of dragon steel whistled through the air, wreathed in faint silver sparks from its enchantments, before slamming squarely into the chest of the closest wraith. Caught off guard, the creature reeled backwards. The hammer didn't simply pass through its form as it might have with any ordinary specter. No, it tore a hole straight through its cursed essence, ripping apart its spectral cohesion and leaving behind a gaping wound of unraveling blue shadow. It collapsed to the forest floor as its cursed form peeled away like burned parchment, revealing a once human corpse beneath the veil writhing on its knees. The remains twitched and convulsed, mouth gurgling as blood bubbled up from its throat, choking off any last, coherent words. Its arms quivered weakly, still clinging to the rusted haft of a scythe. Then, it fell over in a heap of ragged breath and blood. Before the body could even twitch again, a small metallic sphere arced overhead, soaring from the bramble's edge. It landed neatly within the open, twitching chest cavity and exploded. The crack of the detonation was sharp and thunderous. A spray of silver shrapnel ripped through the corpse from within, sending rib fragments and mushy, pink-gray brain matter splattering against the trees. Splinters of spine and skull ejected from the gaping wound like bloody confetti, coating the second wraith in its comrades' obliterated remains. The smell was thick and acrid, burned flesh, scorched metal, and a stale sourness. The second wraith let out a piercing shriek and echoing, soul-rending wail that cut through the forest and scattered birds from the canopy. Its ghostly shroud billowed violently, as if its very soul had flinched at the desecration of its kin. What remained of the corpse beside it spasmed once, and imploded into violet smoke, leaving behind only a faintly pulsating crystal shard. A glyph blazed beneath the surviving wraith, an elegant circular seal laced with twisting lines and ancient calligraphy, pulsing with golden radiance. Dozens if not hundreds of sacred symbols spun along the circle's edge like the workings of a mechanical clock, accelerating until they blurred into a single luminous ring. Stepping out from the dense shadows of the thicket on the opposite side of the path, the caster revealed herself. She wore a cloak and tunic cut in the same colors as Lizyra's, and in both hands she carried a wooden staff crowned with a brightly twinkling sunstone. She raised the staff without breaking her chant. A gale of wind burst outward at her command, snapping her cloak and sending the skirt of her tunic flaring wildly. For a brief, unguarded moment, a large fox-like tail furred in deep reds and purples lashed behind her, caught in the sudden current. The force of the spell knocked her hood back, allowing a pair of fox-like ears to push through her short hair, which shimmered with muted lavender and red hues in the fading light. With each word of the incantation, more glowing magic circles bloomed into existence around the wraith. They fluctuated and spun, orbiting one another in tight, controlled patterns until, upon the final phrase, they snapped into place with a resonant hum. The wraith lurched as if struck by an unseen force, its form slammed down and pinned as radiant seals burned into the ground beneath it. An arrow wreathed in blazing fury tore down from the canopy, striking the creature squarely as the magic circle bound it in place. Ethereal flesh and shadow bulged at the impact point before rupturing outward, obliterating the wraith's shoulder and tearing the scythe from its grasp along with the arm that held it. Drawing in a sharp breath, the girl leveled her staff and shouted, "Lux Divina." The sigil beneath the creature erupted, releasing a violent surge of radiant light that swallowed its body whole. The wraith shrieked as the magic burned through it from the inside out, its limbs unraveling into drifting ash, its face collapsing inward like parchment consumed by flame. What remained pulsed once, coalescing into a fragile violet crystal shard only for that too to fracture and dissolve into fine mist, scattered and devoured by the lingering light. A sharp voice called down from the trees, edged with disbelief. "Kitsune." Lizyra dropped from the canopy a heartbeat later, twisting midair before hitting the ground beside her in a solid crouch that scattered leaves and dirt. She rose immediately, pointing an accusatory finger as she barked, "You incinerated the soul crystal. We needed that to claim the bounty, you overgrown mutt." Still catching her breath from the casting, Kitsune looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes just as Lizyra swatted the side of her head. "You have to be careful with that kind of magic, you mischievous little foxling," she scolded, though the reprimand softened as she grabbed one of Kitsune's furred ears and ruffled it. The gesture did little to disrupt Kitsune's composure as she seemed to enjoy it. Kitsune sighed, dreamy and unapologetic. "I'm sorry," she said, ears twitching. "I was just excited to try the new trap spell Master Theo taught me." Her gaze dipped briefly. "It was my first real attempt at blending arcane and divine magic in the field. I didn't think casting divine light afterward would vaporize everything so completely. I swear." Osiris emerged from the shadows behind them, his long coat swaying with each measured step as he slid a flintlock back into its holster. The faint bite of burnt powder lingered around him. "Well then," he said mildly, lips curving into a sardonic smirk, we'll just deduct the bounty from your cut and put you on refuse duty. Dragons and dire wolves need feeding, after all. Perhaps you could ask them nicely for leftovers. Kitsune gasped. You wouldn't. Onyx returned from the path before Kitsune could protest further, his warhammer resting across one shoulder. In his free hand, he held the unspent soul crystal recovered from the first wraith, its pale glow steady and intact. You'd be competing with Nox, Ragnar, and Ragnus, he said evenly. And the twins don't fight fair. Kitsune groaned, puffing out her cheeks. You're all horrible, she muttered. I couldn't fend off a dragon, let alone 2 dire wolves. You could always try throwing another Lux Divina at them, Osiris offered dryly. Would solve dinner very quickly. Despite her predominantly human frame, Kitsune bore unmistakable signs of her fox heritage. Tawny ears tufted with soft fur crowned her head, twitching with every sound. A full, expressive tail swayed behind her with the ease of breath. Fine fur in muted reds and lavender traced the backs of her hands and top of her feet, her toes tipped with small claws that made boots impractical, leaving her barefoot and unbothered by the forest floor beneath her. Though deceptively petite, Kitsune carried herself with the ease of someone long accustomed to survival. Her talent for enchantments, arcane, and divine magics was matched only by the discipline with which she applied it. Within the caravan she served as one of their healers and alchemists. Her knowledge of anatomy, surgical practice, and different schools of healing magics rivaled that of court physicians of the imperial capital. More than once, she had stitched wounds by torchlight and dragged companions back from the brink of death with bloodied hands and steady focus. Yet even that was only part of her role. When spells failed or distance collapsed, she fought beside them, moving through battle with the same practiced confidence she brought to her magic. The staff she wielded gifted to her by Master Theo was no mere ordinary staff of casting. It was fletched from rare magic wood that was fused and melded together with the dragonwood that grew alongside it. At her whispered command, its form could change in an instant. As an axe, ethereal blades manifested at its sunstone flaring with contained light. As a bow, a string of summoned radiance stretched taut between its ends, each draw conjuring an arrow of condensed magic, crackling with restrained force. It was conduit and weapon alike, shaped as much by will as by hand. Asira brushed dirt from her sleeves and flashed Kitsune a crooked grin. Fear not, she said lightly. If you truly end up banished to leftovers, I'll share my portions. Just give us a little warning before you erase the paycheck next time. Kitsune opened her mouth to answer. Something warm and wet struck her face. The sound came first a violent, choking rupture followed by the copper stench of blood as it sprayed between them. Asira's smile vanished as her pupils snapped tight, her body tensing in instinctive shock. Kitsune's breath caught halfway in her chest, her gaze locked forward as her mind struggled to understand what her senses were screaming. Behind them, from the shadowed edge of the clearing, a massive scythe blade tore through Onyx's chest with a sickening force. The impact lifted him clean off his feet, his body jerking as he was flung backward like an impaled puppet. Blood arced through the air, gleaming briefly beneath the rising moons before splattering across stone and soil. He struck the ground hard. His limbs twitched once, then again, eyes wide and glassy as breath failed him. From the wound, a thick purplish miasma began to spill, curling upward in slow, unnatural coils. The blood pooling beneath him darkened rapidly, the earth beneath recoiling as if rejecting it tainted, cursed, wrong. Foolish. Fucking. Creatures. The words slithered out of the gloom like barbed wire, the timbre low and resonant layered, as if 2 voices spoke at once. You dared strike down my kindred. You will pay, with your lives. The mist of the forest coalesced into a dark purplish miasma writhing, pulsing, until a figure emerged, tall, draped in tatters that bled smoke, its flesh translucent and rippling with dark veins. At its side, it carried a monstrous scythe, the blade jagged like an undead butcher's tool. A wraith but not like the others. This one commanded the darkness. Claiming the mortal realms for yourselves and branding everything else as monsters to be slain. I, Necroth, will be the devourer of your souls. The last word crawled from its ruined throat like a promise made in rot. With a guttural hiss, it surged forward. Asira and Osiris moved as one, launching upward into the trees. Leaves scattered like dying embers as they vanished into the canopy, branches snapping underfoot. Necroth's scythe came crashing down, cleaving through a tree trunk, the force sending shards of wood flying like razors. A wave of corruptive miasma spread outward with every strike, burning plants to ash, sickening the air. Below, Kitsune dropped to her knees beside Onyx, panic choking her throat. His breathing was shallow, rattling like pebbles in a jar. Blood bubbled from the hole in his chest, every convulsion more violent than the last. Her hands glowed instantly, already channeling divine power. Scutum Presidium. The words cut through the chaos like a war drum. A shimmering dome of divine energy encased them, a bubble of golden light that repelled the sickened air. Her staff glowed bright as the sun, veins of holy energy surging down its length and into her hands. She laid them across Onyx's chest, the golden glow sinking into him like warm breath into frozen flesh. With each pulse of her magic, the miasma hissed and recoiled, only to surge again, tendrils trying to wrap around her arms. "Hold on, Onyx," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't you dare die. Don't you fucking dare." Outside the barrier, Necroth roared. Trees fell around him like brittle kindling. The earth split where he walked. The air grew heavier, the light dimmer, and the sky, though still obscured by trees, seemed to darken further. Osira and Osiris darted from tree to tree, firing enchanted rounds, arrows, and launching improvised explosives. The shots shattered across Necroth's armor-like form, barely wounding it, but slowing its path of destruction. Osiris bellowed into the canopy, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. "Vincent said there'd be 2, not 3. By the gods, how have we been so reckless?" The chaos around him surged like a living storm, yet he moved with unerring precision, leaping, vaulting, twisting midair like a shadow given purpose. From within his coat, silver-laced bombs sailed in graceful arcs down onto the nightmare below, bursting in radiant blooms of light and force that tore at the wraith's shadow-wrapped body. But instead of deterring it, the damage only seemed to feed the creature's wrath. Necroth's swings grew more erratic, more violent, its jagged scythe slicing entire trees in half as if they were made of parchment. Purple miasma bled from each wound and seeped into the forest floor like poison, killing everything it touched. From above, Osiris sprang forward from a bough, but the wraith was faster. Its scythe cut through the trunk mid-leap, and the tree she was destined to land on snapped like brittle bone. The canopy gave way beneath her feet, and she plummeted with a scream, flailing helplessly as death rushed up from below. But just before she struck the ground, Osiris dived through the foliage, catching her midair with one arm. The other pulled free a gleaming chain whip from his coat. With a metallic snap, he lashed it to an overhead limb, using its taut resistance to swing them away from the collapsing ruin below. As the momentum steadied and he landed them upon another tree limb, Osira's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the world held still, just the rustle of leaves, the acrid sting of miasma in their lungs, and the beat of their hearts in tandem. With a sheepish smile, she turned to him. "I owe you my thanks for braving such peril to rescue me. Never thought you'd risk life and limb for little ol' me." Osiris gave a breathless laugh. "You honestly doubted I'd come to your rescue? Please. If I let harm befall my little sister, Mother would turn me into a willow or some shit again." Below them, the wraith let out a snarl that curdled the wind itself, its presence now shaking the trees around them. With a sweeping motion, it hurled its scythe, spinning through the air with a whistle sharp enough to shear bone. It carved a corridor of devastation through the forest canopy, splitting trees apart in its path. Osiris barely dodged, leaping to the side and catching a branch mid-fall, but Osira was not so fortunate. The scythe's shockwave struck the base of a great tree just beneath her. The trunk groaned, split, and then fell crashing down upon her like a titan's hand. A scream split the sky. Osira slammed into the forest floor, buried beneath a crushing cascade of branches and timber. Splintered wood tore through flesh and bone. Her legs bent at grotesque angles as the weight crushed them. Each crunch echoed, each nerve screamed, and her voice, raw and agonized, sang a dirge of pain and terror. Blood pooled around her, soaking into the moss and bark. Above the chorus of her suffering came laughter, low, cruel, and echoing. Necroth descended like a phantom executioner, trees wilting in its wake. With bony fingers like talons curled beneath the remnants of the tree trunks, it slowly tore away the barricade of wood to reveal the broken prize beneath. "Filthy fucking creature," it hissed, each word vibrating with absolute hate. But when the final log was flung aside, it found Lizyra still conscious. Barely. Bloodied. But not broken. With her single working arm, she raised her wand. A splintered shaft of magic wood cracked at the hilt, glowing faintly with crimson energy. Her teeth gritted, tears streaking through blood and dirt. She spat. Annihilare. The world lit ablaze. A detonation of pure red and golden light burst from the wand like a dying star. The explosion wasn't just fire, it was destruction made manifest. A scream, both hers and the world's, ripped through the air as the blast vaporized Necroth, annihilated the surrounding trees, and upturned the very earth in a crater of blazing fire and ethereal flame. The forest fell silent. Smoke choked the air. Cinders drifted like falling stars. At the epicenter, Lizyra lay, limp and ruined, her cloak and tunic blasted away, her pale, bruised skin exposed, riddled with lacerations, burns, and broken limbs. Her legs were mangled beyond recognition, and shards of bone pierced through tattered flesh like pale spears jutting from clay. Her body quivered as she fought the blackness pulling at her. One arm remained lifted, trembling, reaching toward the void. Her lips moved, barely forming the words. "Did I vanquish it?" The silence answered. Not with triumph, but stillness. Her arm fell limply beside her, the breath in her chest growing shallow, the pain dimming into numbness. From the only patch of treetops left untouched by the wand's blast, Lizyra came crashing down like an avalanche, landing in the charred crater with a grunt of disbelief. Smoke coiled in serpentine tendrils around him, the scent of scorched earth and blood clinging thick in the air. "Holy shit! Lizyra, what in the hells were you thinking?" he barked, his voice cracking with a tremor that betrayed his fear. He didn't wait for an answer. She was barely breathing, her skin pale and slick with sweat, her eyes rolled back into her skull. Her shattered limbs looked like snapped branches, her body grotesquely twisted beneath the ash and cinder. Gently, but with frantic urgency, he scooped her up into his arms, feeling the sticky warmth of blood soaking into his gloves. Her wand, still gripped loosely in her one functioning hand, caught his eye. He snatched it before it could slip away and shoved it into his coat. Without a second thought, he vaulted into the canopy, branches groaning under his weight as he bounded from limb to limb. "Please, don't you dare die on me, Lizyra," he whispered, then shouted, then screamed, his voice growing hoarse with desperation. Each leap was a reckless gamble, each landing an explosion of pain in his knees, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Then, through the broken trees and rising smoke, he spotted her, Kitsune, kneeling beside the unconscious Onyx, her staff glowing with divine light. He dove down with all the grace of a meteor, landing hard beside her. "Kitsune," he gasped, placing Lizyra carefully onto the earth. He tore his trench coat from his back and covered his sister's body, shielding her from the cool night air. "Help her. Gods, please help her." Kitsune turned, her ears twitching, her golden eyes wide with alarm. "I knew something dreadful had transpired when I saw that blast," she said breathlessly. She turned her attention back to Onyx, finishing the last lines of her healing incantation. The divine circle beneath him flickered once, then faded. "Onyx should recover," she continued, already shifting to Lizyra. "I've broken the curse in his blood, healed the scythe wound as best I can. But his body is still in a fragile state, he'll need time to mend. He won't wake for a while." Lizyra groaned, her breath rattling in her throat. Kitsune's expression hardened. "Now hold still, Lizyra, this is going to hurt." Her staff illuminated again, a celestial light bathing the clearing. Beneath it, the ghastly sound of bones grinding, snapping, resetting filled the air, a gruesome orchestration of restoration. Wet, slurping cracks echoed through the trees as ligaments reknitted and muscles spasmed beneath torn skin. Lizyra turned away, bile rising in his throat. He could handle battle, could stomach wounds, even executions. But this slow, agonizing undoing of mangled death,
Shark
it unnerved
Punch,
even him.
thank you for the follow. I really
Then a sudden
appreciate it.
gasp.
Hopefully you're doing well.
Lizyra's eyes
And thanks for
fluttered
checking
open,
out the
wide
stream.
and distant, her body twitching as nerves reawakened. Her mouth moved before sound came out. "Hey guys," her voice was weak. "Raw. Did I vanquish the Wraith?" Lizyra turned sharply, relief flashing across his face and then fury. "You not only vanquished that wretched bastard," he snapped, his tone sharp and trembling, you obliterated half the goddamn forest and nearly got yourself killed. He snatched the wand out of his coat pocket and tried bending it in half in an attempt to break it. Even though the wand looked frail and on its last breath, it didn't bend an inch between his hands. Grunting while trying to break it, Osiris grunted, "I wish you'd never touch this thing again." Kitsune, now kneeling at her side, cast a worried glance at the wand's jagged grip, blackened and pitted like a relic torn from a battlefield. There it was, the infamous Wand of Annihilation. Crafted by an ancient golem long since reduced to dust, the wand was an arcane aberration, a thing of destructive genius cursed by the clumsy hands of its own creator. The golem, a master spellwright yet a terrible smith, had imbued the wand with power drawn from primordial chaos, a raw, unrefined, barely tethered force of unmaking. The first test of its power ended with the creator's body vaporized in a blast so immense it collapsed the cavern around him. The wand was left behind in his tomb of rubble, sealed in a mountain choked by miasma and haunted by beasts spawned from its lingering madness. Isaac had claimed it after delving into that cursed peak, a relic hunter desperate to burn the rot from the world. And upon returning, he gifted it to Osira, seeing the gap between her archery mastery and her melee skill. He didn't give it with a smile, he gave it with warning. "Last resort," he had said. "Only if there's no other way. This wand has teeth and they'll chew on your soul, too." The wand's destructive ratio was infamous. 99 chances in 100 it would hurt you just as badly if not worse than your target. And yet Osira had drawn it without hesitation. Because, when death clawed toward her, she chose to pull the trigger. Osiris looked down at his sister, the adrenaline now ebbing, replaced by dread and 1,000 unspoken words. He wanted to scold her again. To curse. To shake her. Instead, he just knelt beside her and held her trembling hand. "I loathe that cursed object," Osira muttered bitterly, her voice hoarse and ragged. Her fingers flexed weakly around the wand before she placed it in a pocket within Osiris' coat. "It tries to kill me every time I wield it, but gods be damned, there's no denying its effectiveness." She shifted her weight, attempting to move her legs or even sit upright. Nothing. Only her good arm responded, the rest of her body remained a heap of bruised and mending bone and sinew, her limbs limp and numb from trauma and overexertion. Osiris scoffed as he retucked the wand deeper away, careful not to touch the warped shaft more than necessary. The thing radiated like a loaded trap, pulsing faintly with latent heat, as though resentful it hadn't taken its wielder with it. "In truth," he said dryly, "you're quite fortunate. Miraculous, really. Given the number of times you've rolled the dice with that wand, I'm amazed you haven't gone up in smoke. I'd have expected a crater where you stood in a vague whiff of burnt elf." Osira smirked despite herself, her expression weary and frayed. "A crater and a breeze of regrets, I'm sure." Kitsune, still kneeling beside her, had her eyes closed tightly in concentration. Sweat dotted her brow, her fingers trembling as divine light poured from her staff, weaving into Osira's bones like ethereal thread. She had been channeling without pause, and the effort had clearly taken its toll. Her breathing had grown shallow and erratic, her lips moving in barely audible incantations. "It appears," Kitsune began, her voice barely above a whisper, "all critical injuries have been stabilized. But, the bones will take more time. The healing magic is still at work beneath the surface. You must remain still for at least a day. 2, if you want to avoid anything, snapping again." Her hands faltered, the glowing sigils around her staff dimming. She blinked hard once, trying to focus, but her golden eyes had glazed over. "I fear I may have overdone it a bit." Then, without warning, her small frame slumped forward. She let out a soft exhale and collapsed face first into Osira's chest, her staff falling to the ground with a wooden clatter. "Shit!" Osira cried out as Kitsune's head landed squarely on her bruised ribs, sending a fresh jolt of pain down her spine. "You might need to heal that spot again, Foxy," she said with an exhausted, painful laugh. But within seconds, the sharpness dulled again. Her one still working hand rose and began to gently stroke Kitsune's hair with quiet, affectionate circles. "It's all right," she whispered. Her eyelids drooped again, lashes fluttering against her cheeks as the haze of exhaustion crept back in. "At least everything's still in one piece. If only I had a more generous, cushionier bosom, you might have had a softer landing." Her voice faded to a faint hum. And like that, she surrendered to unconsciousness once more, her breath rising and falling in rhythm with Kitsune's, the two of them curled together in a tangled heap of scorched cloth, sweat, and fragile peace. Osiris stood a few paces away, watching them with a look that hovered somewhere between fondness, disbelief, and total exasperation. "Ain't this fucking great," he muttered, dragging a hand down his face and smearing it with sweat and dried blood. His voice dripped with sarcasm, but the tremor in his hand betrayed a little of the adrenaline still working its way out of his system. He looked over at Onyx, still unconscious in the grass, half wrapped in dried blood and torn garments, and then down at the cuddled, unconscious mass of Kitsune and Asira. "How in the hells," he grumbled, "am I supposed to haul these unconscious degenerates back to camp?"
Alright, so there was no major edits really needed in that chapter, so on to the next. Just chapter 3. Yeah, so my chapters are probably unnecessarily long, but there's just no way to fit everything in. 3,500 words, it has to happen in each one of them. And then each one of them's had like 5 or 6 drafts each, so there's just 10 years of accumulating this without any knowledge on how to write a book. So let me just prepare the next chapter and get the sounds ready. I'm kind of imitating the old audiobooks I made for it too while we do this, just so it's not Microsoft Word AI voice reading everything. And then the music you hear, of course, is like the intro and the outro I used for each chapter. I tried to make it where it was like 45 minutes to an hour long when you listen to it. Not when you read it. Not like when Fry's like, it took an hour to write. I thought it'd take an hour to read. From Futurama, you know. Alright, so we got this, we got that. It's all set up. I drank that energy water way too quick, and now my stomach's throbbing. Me. I also looks like my sub and bits counter got fucked up upon the last sub earlier. Looks like it's saying things that it shouldn't be on top of the screen, but it is what it is. Before that sub, it was a 0 out of 4, and now it says 1 day's sub count. Last 1 day's. Stream Elements is falling apart, talking about closing shop, so I mean, I'll just fix that after they decide whether they're going under or not. Oh man, my stomach hurting. God damn. And this is a shortened version of Polyphia's song, Iconic. I shortened it to 2 minutes instead of 4. So it'd fit the traditional time length of an anime opening.
Chapter 3. A Coach Driver's Throne.
Rosai/Nizera/3/Y997/6th Age, Dusk Tide. A tempest of sparks danced in the air as twin sickles clashed against the sweeping arc of a dark, double-blade glaive. Two elven warriors dueled with relentless agility, their battle a blur of motion, steel, and intent. One, wielding the glaive with practiced precision, executed a handless cartwheel flip that seemed to mock gravity. As she spun midair, her weapon carved a deadly arc.
There it is. I also have to take a fucking piss real quick. Alright, edit that. I'm gonna pause the sound and listen to this music real quick while I take a fucking piss. And thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. All right, I'm back. Back to the story.
Toward her opponent. Adorning the glaive wielder's head were two small, devilish horns that pierced through locks of tousled purple hair that, on calmer days, might have barely brushed her shoulders. From beneath the hem of her short, belted tunic, a garment of vibrant green and soft black, a slender, succubus-like tail was wrapped around her waist, tucked discreetly beneath her belt for safety. Her adversary evaded with grace, sliding low beneath the strike, and as she did, a flash of undergarments flickered in the fading light caused by the skirt of the glaive wielder's tunic brushing against one of the antlers crowning her rival's brow. Seizing the opening, the wood elf struck upward with a sickle, eyes alight with focus and the thrill of the duel. This was no mere sparring match. Their duel was a breathtaking dance, a contest shaped by a rivalry as fierce as a dragon's wrath, tempered by a bond forged in fire. Each strike sang of shared battles, unspoken trust, and honed instinct. Their blades clashed again with a resonant cry of metal. The horned elf twisted her weapon to deflect the blow and regain her footing, her body moving with a predatory elegance. Even before she turned to face her foe, she swept the bottom blade of her glaive behind her, catching another blow by instinct alone. She spun in one fluid motion, countering with a sweeping arc. But then an abrupt shift. A sliver of antler fell, spinning slowly as it tumbled to the grass below. The glaive wielder froze, momentarily stunned. Her blade had become entangled in her opponent's antlers. A mischievous grin curved the wood elf's lips. Instead of withdrawing, she twisted and pressed into the entrapment, tangling the glaive even further. With her foe's weapon ensnared, she unleashed a furious flurry of sickle strikes, their razor-sharp edges grazing fabric, slicing through air, biting close to skin. The sickles, shorter than most and only slightly curved, were crafted from rare dragon steel obsidian alloy, their gleaming black blades lined with golden elvish inscriptions etched along their spines. They hummed with latent magic as they carved through the space between them. Then, with a sudden snap of her neck, the antlered elf jerked upward, wrenching her opponent's glaive into the sky. In the same breath, she drove a firm kick into the devilish elf's midsection, sending her tumbling backward. The glaive clattered to the ground nearby. Though the horned elf was taller, it was the wood elf who now stood dominant. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, her frame battered but unbowed. One of her antlers had been shortened, blunted in the clash, but she paid it no mind. Her hair, streaked with hues of burnished brown and glinting ember, caught the dying sun's rays as it filtered through the trees. Her long bangs framed her sharp, angular face, while shorter layers danced around the nape of her neck. From beneath her windswept mane, her antlers curved skyward with youthful majesty, like the proud rise of a stag in its prime. While clad in a dark green tunic cinched at the waist with a rugged leather belt, and a cloak of earthen brown that danced like a restless spirit in the swirling wind, the wood elf teased with a smile, "It looks as though you have been defeated." Before she could finish her sentence, her opponent, swift as a storm-born arrow, transitioned from a rolling recovery to an explosive charge. The devilish elf girl, already gripping her glaive once more, launched herself forward with such velocity it seemed the very air bent around her. Her movements blurred into a backward corkscrew flip, her glaive spinning in tandem, each motion imbued with a grace so fluid it bordered on supernatural. It was as if she traversed space not through sprinting, but by slipping momentarily between realms. Though the glaive swung with lethal precision and speed, the wood elf responded with the instinct of a true forest-born warrior. She leapt high, stepping lightly off the flat of the incoming blade as if it were a platform carved from moonlight, and vaulted over her adversary's head with the effortless agility of a wind sprite. But the wood elf's defiance was short-lived. Before she landed, the devilish elf's tail whipped around her ankle like a striking vine, yanking her back down to the earth with brutal force. She hit the ground face first with a muffled grunt, her body skidding slightly in the dirt as the wind was knocked from her lungs. With a fluid twist and the blade of her glaive poised just beneath Gwen's neck, the devilish elf declared coolly, "No. It appears you've been defeated this time, Gwen." With a smirk.
Oh, I was saying I was muted. Gwen's name was said like one line before it was supposed to. So I have to change it so her name is revealed when the other elf says it. Not the sentence before. Let me find it on my other WordPad. Oh, excuse me. So let me go in here. Just sometimes through the drafts, you forget that the names haven't been revealed yet. I don't know how that one slipped through. So here we go.
With a fluid twist and the blade of her glaive poised just beneath the wood elf's neck, the devilish elf declared coolly, "No. It appears you've been defeated this time, Gwen." With a smirk, she withdrew the weapon and slung it back into a custom hook holster on her back. "I've long since lost count of our sparring matches, victories and defeats alike, but I dare say, I'm in the lead." She turned away, her paludamentum billowing behind her like the trailing plume of a bird of prey, each stride echoing a slight pout disguised beneath the mask of confidence as she strode toward the large bonfire flickering in the center of the caravan circle. With a groan of exaggerated suffering, Gwen rolled onto her hands and knees and spat a mouthful of grass and dirt. "Gods, Ifer, you didn't have to slam me like that," she coughed, brushing dirt and tangled grass from her hair and the grooves of her antlers. "You kicked me in the stomach," Ifer shot back over her shoulder, plopping down onto a weathered crate beside the fire. "So, you absolutely deserved it." The camp was encircled by massive double-decker caravan wagons, strategically arranged in a protective ring. These imposing vehicles were more fortress than transport, each composed of two rectangular wagons hitched end-to-end like rolling citadels. Drawn by teams of horses and armored dragon rhinoceros, the caravans bore the weight and purpose of a mobile stronghold. The wagons' exteriors were reinforced with dragon steel-framed wooden panels, and each level bore small, rectangular windows fitted with retractable shutters. Mounted iron torch brackets flanked each windowsill, casting flickering light that warded off both shadow and beast. Though each pair of conjoined wagons made up one caravan unit, only the lead wagon had a ground-level entrance into the living quarters. This primary door offered access to both interconnected wagons within. At the rear of the trailing wagon was a larger bay door used sparingly meant for loading supplies, setting up or breaking camp, and accommodating the entry of large beasts such as Nox and the other bonded animals of the crew. The overall layout of the camp exuded efficiency and readiness, a battlefield's edge cloaked in the appearance of a nomadic community. And at its center, the flickering bonfire crackled like the heart of a great beast, its flames dancing to the rhythm of the evening wind. The front of each wagon, leading the three caravan cars, featured an elevated coach driver's quarters commonly referred to as the cockpit. Designed to seat up to 6 people comfortably, it was sheltered beneath a soft canvas top that rose into a triangular peak at the front, mimicking the prow of a wooden ship. Beneath this canvas was a reinforced wooden structure, angled and raised high off the ground to deter intruders from scaling the wagon walls with ease. Above the ceiling of the second story in all wagons ran a continuous canvas canopy. Beneath it lay the upper level, a storage deck packed with crates, spare parts, and vital tools used for maintaining the caravan and its equipment. This area served as the logistical heart of the convoy, housing anything from wagon wheel fittings to collapsible armor racks and replacement crossbow limbs. Strapped securely across the tops of the wagons was a sophisticated network of large barrels, linked by an intricate piping system. These containers distributed various essential fluids throughout the caravan, fresh water to showers, sinks, and latrines, ale to the kitchens and mess areas, and enchanted concoctions such as potions, drafts, and elixirs directly to the armories. This self-sustaining system allowed the caravan to remain in the field for extended missions, whether fulfilling mercenary contracts, hunting monsters, or embarking on quests. Each wagon was also fortified with a basic defense grid. Small catapults and light cannons were cleverly concealed within the floors and walls of the second story, hidden beneath retractable segments of the canvas roof. These weapons were positioned strategically along both the port and starboard sides between rows of storage crates. 2 of the 6 wagons, however, sacrificed much of their cargo space to accommodate a more formidable and complex weapons platform. These specialized wagons housed modular siege systems, larger cannons, rapid deploy ballistæ mounted on rotating platforms, and heavy-duty catapults. With a pull of a lever, the canvas overhead could retract, and the half-walls above the second story and beneath the canopy would fold outward at a 90-degree angle, transforming the upper level into a fully operational open-air deck. Each ballista could be controlled from a dedicated operator's seat lined with levers, cranks, and firing triggers, allowing for fine-tuned aiming and rapid reloading. Twin magazine hoppers flanked the ballista's base, automatically fed from hidden spring-loaded storage chambers in the lower deck ceiling designed for speed and efficiency in chaotic combat situations. The front wagon of each caravan car included a mid-level split staircase just behind the cockpit. This central stairwell connected the upper and lower levels and served as a main thoroughfare through the vehicle's interior. Internally, each wagon was uniquely outfitted based on its role. In most cases, the lead wagon of each caravan included the cockpit, a dining hall, multiple bunk bed cabins, a latrine, and basic storage lockers. The rear wagon, by contrast, featured a different configuration tailored to its function. Wagons equipped with lighter weapon systems generally offered more creature comforts, extra sleeping quarters, full kitchens, additional bathing facilities, and extra lavatories. Those with heavier armaments, however, replaced comfort with combat readiness. These wagons featured reinforced armories, war gear staging areas, and specialized equipment for deploying traps, explosives, and magical barriers. They were purpose-built for confronting large-scale threats, massive ground beasts, swarms, or flying monsters encounters that would overwhelm a typical party on foot. Together, these 6 conjoined wagons formed not merely a caravan, but a roving bastion of steel, magic, and ingenuity, equal parts fortress and home for its war-tested crew. At the helm of the lead wagon, under the drooping shadow of a wide-brimmed hat sagging backward toward the staircase entrance, sat a man of unassuming stature. His attire an aged, dark brown cloak and shaggy, medium-length hair of a matching hue blended seamlessly with the rustic charm of the caravan. Atop his hat, a small cat lay curled in tranquil slumber. He lounged with a practiced ease, feet propped upon the wooden rail and dash panel before him, hands clasped leisurely behind his head.
Real quick, just want to get rid of that. Let's try this one.
He lounged within his seat, his feet propped upon the wooden rail and dash panel before him, hands clasped leisurely behind his head. From between his lips, a thin stream of smoke lazily curled skyward, spiraling into the dusky air as he puffed on a long-stemmed cob pipe exuding the air of a man who had long since mastered his domain. His gaze followed Gwen as she trudged toward the bonfire, her steps exaggerated, her gait a pantomime of exhaustion and defeat after her sparring loss to Ifer. Her cape fluttered gently in the evening breeze, trailing behind her like a wounded banner. With every lumbering step, she released drawn-out groans, muttering playful curses under her breath as she fastened her sickles into sheaths strapped to the sides of her boots. The heart of the caravan glowed with the warmth of a lively fire. Around the blaze, several iron tripods supported bubbling cauldrons, their contents rich with the scents of broth and spice. Makeshift tables, crafted from old shipping crates and reinforced planks, or an assortment of cutlery, mugs, and leftover provisions. Eifer sat cross-legged on one of the crates, a heaping slab of meat clutched in both hands. She tore into it with sharp, shark-like teeth, each bite lacking in etiquette. Blood and juices ran freely down her chin, dripping in rivulets onto the wooden plate balanced on her lap. Unlike Gwen, who bore the elegant and refined features of a full-blooded wood elf, Eifer was of mixed descent, half Ael'thir elf, half Aspro devil. Her lineage, though demonized by the Valmosian Empire, did nothing to dim her striking beauty or her ferocity. The Aspro devils, a succubus-like people with long, ancient ties to both infernal and celestial magics, had been ostracized by the Empire for the past decade. Along with other so-called dark races, as well as beastmen and demi-humans, they were hunted, enslaved, or driven into hiding across much of the continent. Gwen approached, standing beside her with a smirk. "Have you even given that meat a chance to cook, or are you just gnawing on it raw like some half-feral beast?" Eifer responded with a wicked grin, tearing off another bloody hunk. "I favor it rare and bloody," she said between chews. Her expression softened, and she offered a solemn glance up at Gwen. "Also, sorry about the antler." Gwen crouched beside the cauldron and dipped a ladle into its simmering depths, filling a wooden bowl balanced atop a crate. "Don't trouble yourself over it," she said, giving a faint shrug. "They were overdue." She lifted the bowl and took a long, noisy pull, steam ghosting across her face before she continued. "Branches grow fast when you let them," she added. "Too fast. And once they start catching on door frames and drawing stairs, it's past time for a cut." Her mouth twisted faintly as she swallowed another mouthful. "I've never had patience for crowded places. Too many eyes. Too many hands brushing where they shouldn't. I'd rather lose a few inches than spend every step ducking like some sideshow curiosity." Her words were cut short by a sudden thump as a 6-inch-tall fairy crashed headfirst onto Gwen's skull, clutching one of her antlers like the handle of a galloping horse. The soup bowl tumbled from Gwen's hands and splashed across the dirt, sending chunks of meat and potatoes flying. Clinging to the antler, the fairy declared, "Your antlers are a mark of dignity and heritage, not shame. We needn't bow to the tastes of those boot-licking imperial peacocks just because they find your traits offensive." Gwen scowled, reaching down to retrieve her fallen bowl. "Damn it, Esmeralda," she snapped. "Could you not dive bomb onto my head while I'm eating?" She dusted herself off, refilled her bowl, and slumped down next to the fire. "And it's not about pleasing those pompous sycophants," she muttered between mouthfuls. As she took a deep draught from the refilled bowl, something from earlier that morning surfaced unbidden in Gwen's thoughts. The memory caught her mid-slurp. She choked as laughter burst from her chest, a steaming spray of stew erupting from her nostrils. Shredded meat, softened potato, and strands of noodles splattered across the ground as she doubled over, coughing and laughing in equal measure. Eifer paused mid-bite, grinned broadly, and wiped her chin. "Now that's the spirit," she said. "Really let it settle in there. Wouldn't want you missing the flavor." Esmeralda clung tightly to Gwen's antlers as Gwen's
So she said might be too plain. Let me go back. Should be she cheered. Sounds more appropriate. She cheered, and then obscenely from her nose. Alright, we fixed that. Alright. So let's go back.
Eifer paused mid-bite, grinned broadly, and wiped her chin. "Now that's the spirit," she cheered. "Really let it settle in there. Wouldn't want you missing the flavor." Esmeralda clung tightly to Gwen's antlers as Gwen's shoulders shook, her head rocking back and forth while wet noodles dangled.
You shouldn't have her name said twice in the same sentence right there. Start back. There you go.
Iver paused mid-bite, grinned broadly, and wiped her chin. Now that's the spirit, she cheered. Really let it settle in there. Wouldn't want you missing the flavor. Esmeralda clung tightly to Gwen's antlers as her shoulders shook, her head rocking back and forth while wet noodles dangled obscenely from her nose. Have you gone mad? The fairy shrieked, her voice barely audible over Gwen's hysterics. Oblivious, Gwen continued to cackle. Iver, still seated by the fire, cast Gwen an amused glance. After the way you caught my glaive with those antlers, she said dryly, I half expect you to charge down a city road one day, headbutting unsuspecting townsfolk like some antlered menace. She raised the last bite of her steak toward her lips. Before she could take it, a massive dire wolf, its coat a mingling of shadowed gray and snowy white, slipped in beside her and enthusiastically licked her face, greedily claiming every lingering trace of meat and grease. Caught off guard, Iver yelped and scrambled back only to lose her footing and tumble off the crate, landing flat on her back with a grunt. An equally massive white dire wolf immediately joined in, eager to assist. The pair loomed over her like slobbering mountains, cold noses nudging at her tunic while their tongues swept across her cheeks, sniffing and rooting for any forgotten morsels hidden in her pockets. Gwen's howling laughter finally ebbed into wheezing giggles. She wiped tears from her eyes, drew a shaky breath, and managed to speak. Forgive my mirth, she said between lingering chuckles. I had just remembered this morning, when I entered the showers and stumbled upon Isaac singing while he bathed. I tried to retreat quietly, but he stepped out of the stall without a stitch on him. She winced. When he caught me fleeing, he said next time I'd have to pay for the show.
And I noticed this sentence right here got fucked up, so let's fix that. Let me go down here and we find it right now. There it is. How did this, like, why is like one sentence fucked up out of like the rest of them? I do not know, but we're going to resume.
That's what amused you? That's what Esmeralda. Gwen's howling laughter finally ebbed into wheezing giggles. She wiped tears from her eyes, drew a shaky breath, and managed to speak. Forgive my mirth, she said between lingering chuckles. I had just remembered this morning, when I entered the showers and stumbled upon Isaac singing while he bathed. I tried to retreat quietly, but he stepped out of the stall without a stitch on him. She winced. When he caught me fleeing, he said next time I'd have to pay for the show. Esmeralda wrinkled her nose. That's what amused you? That's not even funny. And Isaac? She scoffed. He couldn't hold a tune if his life depended on it, let alone say something clever. Iver, still pinned beneath the affectionate wolves, managed to say between licks, that's not true. He's always cracking jokes with that gruff voice of his. Esmeralda scoffed. Maybe to you. To me, he sounds like a pair of pigs being strangled while a banshee wails over their corpses. As Gwen fished one final noodle from her nostril, she chuckled and said, I actually like his voice. It reminds me of a brook, soft, steady, water murmuring over mossy stones beneath the drowsy moons. After gathering 2 generous portions of stew, meat, and potatoes into wooden bowls, Iver set them down before the dire wolves. She scratched behind their ears as they eagerly began to devour the offerings. His voice, she mused aloud, I always thought it was more like a breeze, cool and slow, rustling through the leaves of a sassafras tree at dusk tide. Perched atop Gwen's head, Esmeralda looked down at the two of them with no small amount of disdain, her face scrunched in disbelief as they continued to compare Isaac's voice to the sounds of nature. Despite her tiny stature, no taller than 6 or 8 inches, Esmeralda was anything but fragile. A woodland fairy by birth, she wore a worn green tunic that mirrored Gwen's in both hue and cut. Around her waist, She sported a thick golden ring, a piece of enchanted jewelry that once belonged on the hand of an ogre, now repurposed as a belt. This was no ordinary ornament. The ring was enchanted with magical strength, and when worn around Esmeralda's waist, its effects remained fully active. A single punch from her tiny fist now struck with the force of a full-grown man's, if not more. Thanks to the artifact, she could haul, throw, or swing items many times her own weight with little effort. While she still struggled with fine dexterity tasks due to her size, brute strength was no longer one of her limitations. Like Gwen, she bore a pair of small antlers, each jutting subtly from her short, tousled brown hair. Her wings shimmered a vivid blue, fluttering with a soft hum, while her amber brown eyes glowed faintly as they caught the firelight. She wore tiny cloth wrappings on her feet like socks, her arms folded sternly across her chest as she observed the girls with a perpetual scowl and a sass-laced smirk. Ifer seized 2 more steaks from a tray resting on a crate beside the fire, gripping one in each hand. Tearing a chunk from one with her teeth, she chewed loudly and called out, "Theo. They've been gone for ages. Maybe try reaching out with your telepathic thingy." Theo, see.
Alright. And that was fucked up. So we go down and we change right there.
They've been gone for. Ifer seized 2 more steaks from a tray resting on a crate beside the fire, gripping one in each hand. Tearing a chunk from one with her teeth, she chewed loudly and called out, "Coach driver. They've been gone for ages. Maybe try reaching out with your telepathic thingy." Theo, seated comfortably in the coachman's quarters at the front of the nearest wagon, puffed thoughtfully on his long-stemmed pipe. The wide brim of his hat sagged over his brow, casting shadows.
Maybe his full first name sounds better right there. Save. Save. And go.
Seated comfortably in the Theodore, seated comfortably in the coachman's quarters at the front of the nearest wagon, puffed thoughtfully on his long-stemmed pipe. The wide brim of his hat sagged over his brow, casting shadows across his face. A sleepy cat snoozed undisturbed atop the hat's crown. "I was pondering that very thought, Ephekins," he replied. Ifer, her
think that's good. Let's go back here and go.
Theodore, seated comfortably in the coachman's quarters at the front of the nearest wagon, puffed thoughtfully on his long-stemmed pipe. The wide brim of his hat sagged over his brow, casting shadows across his face. Still sleeping undisturbed atop the hat's crown, was the small black cat. I was pondering that very thought, Ephekins, he replied. Ifer, her mouth still full, stood abruptly and declared, that is not my name. You'll call me Ifer, like everyone else. She swallowed, took another bite, and muttered through a mouthful of meat, nor am I to be called Fairy Doodle, Ifei Pie, or Ifeilicious. Theo chuckled, the smoke from his pipe curling lazily through the air. You don't seem to mind when Kiel calls you that every time we stop through Darkwell. Ifer's face, once again glazed with meat juices, twisted in indignation. That's because he's a tavern master who tips us generously for our services. I assure you, if I'd ever seen him squatting in the privy with the door wide open like you, I wouldn't let him call me those names either. Theo's face flushed. He stiffened slightly and said with sudden authority, the door was broken. How many times must I explain that? Ifer shot back, and you couldn't find one with a door that works. There are 4 other privies. Gwen, still seated nearby and sipping from her bowl, chimed in with a grin. I think he likes pooping with the door open. He's like one of those voyeurs who charge people to peep through holes and watch them do weird stuff. Ifer blinked, feigning innocence. Oh? That explains where you sneak off to when you're off duty. Gwen nearly dropped her bowl again. No. I was just making a point. He's been doing this for years. With her arms crossed and a smirk playing on her lips, Ifer said, At this rate, he might as well just squat out in the woods with Ragnar and Ragnus. At the mention of their names, the 2 dire wolves lifted their heads briefly from their bowls, their tails wagging. Still smudged with grease, Ifer reached over and affectionately scratched behind Ragnar's ears. Meanwhile, Theo exhaled a long sigh and declared, the other privies lack the comfort and security that one offers. Gwen raised an eyebrow. How in the hells does a toilet offer security? Especially one with a broken door. Theo straightened, tapping the bowl of his pipe against the railing. That particular throne crafted of porcelain and obsidian glass sits directly across from a large hallway window. From there, I can keep watch for incoming threats. And behind it, mounted into the hull, is a thick plate of black dragon steel, so if anyone tries to strike from behind, their feeble attempt is thwarted. Ifer, glaring over her shoulder with a mouthful of meat, scoffed, You're a Grandmaster spell sword and you can't fix a door. She added, Can't you, like, sense people's life essence or whatever? I thought you could detect monsters and everything long before they got close. Theo replied smugly, Firstly, not everyone trained in the arcane arts gollivants around with their robes left ajar and their cocks swinging about like some self-important battle bard. And secondly, I have tried to repair it but the frame's warped and the screw holes are stripped. Hinges won't bite into the wood no matter what I use. He muttered, I've brought it up to Morik on many occasions, but he just waves me off with that God's damned, I'll get to it later, tone. Gwen chuckled and remarked, See? I told you he just wants to poop with the door open. With a sudden yelp, Esmeralda exclaimed, Enough. I can't bear to hear any more of your excuses and crude talk about bodily functions or how Isaac's voice, soft as the verdant moss on an enchanting tree stump glistening in morning dew and could soothe even the most restless infant trolls to sleep. She soared into the air, her tiny yet powerful voice booming for all to hear. Now cease your chatter and contact Osira or Osiris like Ifer suggested. Theo scoffed, puffing on his pipe. Hey, I was just defending my honor while these tiny prepubescent gremlins were attacking me. Gwen shot back sourly, I am neither tiny, nor prepubescent, nor a gremlin. I'm almost 42, thank you very much. Theo countered, matter-of-factly, both of you barely reach 5 feet in height, I've never seen either of you with a partner, and you both cackle like lunatics into the wee hours of the night from your room keeping the entire caravan awake. Mind you, leaving everyone to ponder what in the hells you two could possibly be doing in there. So yes, I'd say my statement was accurate. And even if you are in your 40s, that still makes you babies by most elven standards. Ifer, polishing off the last bites of her 2 steaks, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and added, "Actually, coach driver, I can't say for certain how old I am. My father never bothered to celebrate birthdays. He sold me off to slavers not long after my mother passed. So until you guys rescued me, I've just been telling people I'm the nice, youthful age of 100. With a casual elegance, she rose from her crate, her paludamentum fluttering behind her like a noble's cloak. Arching her back, she stretched her arms high above her head. Before the group could dwell too long on her grim past, Ifer's tone shifted to a mischievous boast. "Can you believe those cultist bastards tried to sell me off for only 100 gold coins?" Finishing her stretch, she declared with conviction, "I am worth no less than 1,000 gold, maybe even 20 dragonstone coins." She began counting her fingers as if the numbers danced tangibly before her eyes. Gwen sprang to her feet, nearly upending her bowl in the process. Bits of soup splattered to the ground as she threw her arms dramatically into the air and cried, "I would have gladly parted with 1,000,000 dragonstone coins for my dear Ifeipoo." Floating high above them, Esmeralda screamed in exasperation, "Is anyone paying attention to me?" Sensing the shift in energy and the need to get back on track, Theo finally sat upright in the driver's seat and reached for the rapier sheathed beside him. Holding it before him, he whispered a brief incantation. The gem embedded in the sword's hilt began to glow faintly, a gentle, pulsing light that shimmered in tune with his voice. "Osiris, are you present? What's causing the delay?" Osiris's voice crackled to life from the gem, coated in frustration. "Finally. Took you long enough to check in. We wrapped up the job hours ago, but these delinquents decided to take a nap just as we finished. We need a pickup, pronto." Theo chuckled lightly, taking another puff from his pipe. "Sounds like you got put through the ringer." Osiris snapped back, "Watch your tongue, coach driver. We executed the mission flawlessly. We just ran into a few minor hiccups." All right," Theo said, nodding to himself. "We'll wait for Lizyra and Isaac to return, then we'll come get you. Hang tight." Without waiting for another snide remark, he closed the channel. The gem dimmed, and Theo stood, stretching his arms above his head. His cloak fluttered in the rising night breeze as he called out, "Everyone, pack up. We're leaving as soon as Lizyra and Isaac get back. Osiris and party need a pickup." With gentle care, Theo lifted the slumbering cat from the top of his hat and set it onto the seat behind him. Grasping the side rail of the cockpit, he vaulted over the edge of the wagon, his coat billowing like the wings of a hawk in descent. Landing in a graceful somersault, he rolled to a stop beside the encampment. Nearby, a collapsible stable stood at the edge of the camp, where dragon rhinos and horses were nestled peacefully, gnawing on their feed. The low creak of leather harnesses and the occasional snort of the beasts blended with the fading crackle of the fire. Theo Nearby, a collapsible stable stood at the edge of the camp, where dragon rhinoceros and horses were nestled peacefully, gnawing on their feed. The low creak of leather harnesses and the occasional snort of the beasts blended with the fading crackle of the fire. Theo moved toward the supply compartments built into the side of the wagon, pulling open a panel and beginning to pack essential provisions for the journey. His face, though calm, bore a tightness around the eyes, a look of a man who'd lived through enough battles to know when quiet moments were only the eye of a coming storm. A man nearly as tall as Theo, his long spiked brownish-red hair bursting out from behind the headband that hugged his forehead, emerged from one of the adjacent caravan cars. Lightly clad in plated leather armor, he wore the air of a seasoned warrior, though the worry etched into his face betrayed his concern. "Are they truly in danger?" he asked, voice low and firm. "Or are you merely dancing with your words again, Theo?" Theo's Theo moved toward the supply compartments built into the side of the wagon, pulling open a panel and beginning to pack essential provisions for the journey. His face, though calm, bore a tightness around the eyes, a look of a man who'd lived through enough battles to know when quiet moments were only the eye of a coming storm. A man nearly as tall as Theo, his long spiked brownish-red hair bursting out from behind the headband that hugged his forehead, emerged from one of the adjacent caravan cars. Lightly clad in plated leather armor, he wore the air of a seasoned warrior, though the worry etched into his face betrayed his casual demeanor. Are they truly in danger?
His casual demeanor. It was a dementor. Demeanor. It's supposed to be demeanor, but I'm fucking high and haven't slept in like almost 24 hours and I can't spell to begin with, so yeah. They're right here.
A man nearly as tall as Theo, his long spiked brownish red hair bursting out from behind the headband that hugged his forehead, emerged from one of the adjacent caravan cars. Lightly clad in plated leather armor, he wore the air of a seasoned warrior, though the worry etched into his face betrayed his casual demeanor. Are they truly in danger? He asked, voice low and firm, or are you merely dancing with your words again, Theo? Theo's reply was immediate, his tone edged with gravity. Not at this moment. Osiris said the others were napping, which likely means they're recovering from injuries and Kitsune overexerted herself healing them. But if we delay much longer, the creatures of the night will begin to stir, and that's when things could turn grim. From above, Esmeralda descended in a delicate spiral of shimmering wings, settling beside the spiky-haired man. Vincent, she huffed, hands on her hips, you'll need to assert your authority. They've lost themselves to vulgarity and are ignoring me entirely. Vincent gave a solemn nod. Very well. He turned toward the others, his voice rising over the crackling fire and murmurs of the camp. Let's all prepare to depart the moment Isaac and Lizyra return. We'll move swiftly to retrieve Osiris' party and venture forth to rejoin with Vlad's. He turned back toward the steel-plated wagon door, but paused as if remembering something. Reaching into one of his side pouches, he pulled free a silver ring and looked back toward Esmeralda. Hey, Mare. I nearly forgot to give you this. He extended the enchanted item in his open palm. It's the fire ring we found in the Temple of Emberix. Isaac modified it. It should now fit around your waist. He said it might amplify your wind magic, maybe even let you harness lightning or plasma. Esmeralda floated down gracefully into his hand and plucked the ring with dainty fingers. Thank you, Vincent. I'll pretend it was a gift from you, rather than from Isaac. Vincent smirked. You really ought to be nicer to him. In the last 6 or 7 years, he's done more for you than anyone else here. He even tailors all your clothes. Most fairies I've met just fly around stark naked. Esmeralda sniffed indignantly, her nose turned upward in aristocratic disdain. I am not one of those miscreant fae who flaunt their bodies for whimsical amusement. It's been nearly 2 centuries since I arrived on this continent. I've long suspected the fae here suffer from some kind of madness or spiritual affliction. They seem content with nothing more than nude sky dancing and juvenile pranks. Vincent chuckled. Well, we've traveled across more continents than I can count, and you're still the odd one out. The only other fairies like you are the ones running merchant guilds, court libraries, or counting their gold in noble towers. Esmeralda launched back into the air with a dramatic flourish of her wings. As Vincent disappeared into the wagon behind her, his voice called back, echoing from the darkened interior, "For all we know, you've got us all under some long-term enchantment and this whole caravan's just a prank you've been cooking for a decade." Across the camp, Gwen and Ifer were finishing their preparations. They hoisted heavy crates into the rear of one of the double-decker wagons, where the ramp had been lowered. Nearby, Ragnar and Ragnus ascended the ramp of a separate wagon, this one fashioned internally like a mobile barn and collapsed lazily into a massive mound of hay. Their thick coats of gray and white shimmered with residual moonlight filtering through shutters of a nearby window. Unnoticed in the rafters above them, a small black crow perched silently, its obsidian eyes gleaming as it watched the...
Not a crow. A raven. Not a crow. I gotta find it on the other page.
Raven perched silently, its obsidian eyes gleaming as it watched the dire wolves with sharp, deliberate focus. From the main living cabin of the barn wagon, two female caravan members emerged, stepping carefully down the ramp and out into the open campsite. One of them was Riley, a demi-hume of the Felidae race. She wore her usual brown tunic belted snugly at the waist, and her short locks of sky-blue hair bounced slightly with each step. Though her feline heritage was subtle, it was evident in the light whiskers upon her cheeks, the soft ears atop her head, and the sleek tail wrapped discreetly around her waist like a belt. Unlike Kitsune, whose fox features gave her a more fantastical appearance, Riley could pass for human at a distance as long as she kept her ears hidden. Letting out a loud yawn and stretching her arms behind her head, Riley called out, "Good morning, everyone." Esmeralda snapped without missing a beat, "Good morning? The moons have nearly risen." The second girl to emerge was nearly as tall as Riley. Her long, vibrant crimson-red hair spilled freely over her shoulders, and though human, she bore the quiet confidence of someone raised among shadows. Unlike Riley, who wore loose, sleep-soft clothes like someone moments from crawling back into bed, this woman was dressed in sleek, form-fitting armor with a headband tied tightly across her forehead. Her garb resembled that of a shinobi, though it revealed entirely more skin than likely intended. In response to Esmeralda's sharp comment, she rolled her eyes and replied dryly, "Well, you're not the one pulling watch tonight, are you, Buttercup?" As both girls joined in packing up the remnants of camp, Gwen called over, her voice cheerful, "Good evening, Riley. Sakura. Did the two of you sleep well?" Sakura groaned. "Not really. I kept having weird dreams. This evil kitty here, though," she said, nodding toward Riley, "slept like a pampered princess. She kept mumbling in her sleep, and I had to keep kicking the top bunk to shut her up." Riley, unfazed, beamed brightly. "Yes, I did. And I can't wait for my next catnap." She grinned, clearly proud of herself. As they worked, the melody of distant wings stirred the air, a sound like harp strings plucked by the wind. Heads turned skyward. From the dusky heavens above, Nox descended in a graceful arc, his enormous wings beating in silence. Atop his back sat Lizyra, her hair tousled by the wind. They touched down beside the crackling bonfire with a soft thud that rustled the grass beneath their feet. Sliding down from Nox's back, Lizyra waved and called out, "I'm back, everyone. Sorry it took so long." "Welcome back, Lizyra," Gwen called joyfully, already making her way over. The others gathered around Nox like children reuniting with a beloved pet. Hands reached out with affection, rubbing his snout, scratching behind his wings, giving him gentle pats on his gleaming black scales. The dragon rumbled in contentment, his tail curling lazily around the fire pit. From her pouches on her belt, Ifer pulled a few thick steaks clearly stolen away earlier before Ragnar and Ragnus could sniff them out and tossed them to Nox with a mischievous smirk. "There you go, big guy," she said, rubbing his neck. Lizyra folded her arms, her lips curling into a mock pout as she turned up her nose. "Well, it's good to see all of you too," she said pointedly. But before she could continue the performance, her brow furrowed slightly. She glanced around the campsite. "Wait, has Isaac already made it back?" Ifer shook her head without looking up from Nox. "Nope. You beat everyone else here," she said, cheerfully watching the dragon rip into his steak like a seasoned predator. Behind Lizyra, a gentle hand came to rest on her head, ruffling her hair and knocking her hat askew. "There's no need to fret," said Theo, his voice calm and assuring. "Isaac can take care of himself. I checked in with him earlier. Said you were on your way back, and he just had something to handle." Lizyra spun to face him, her face instantly lighting up. "Master Theo," she cried, throwing her arms up with excitement. "I got to use the new spells you taught me. And it was incredible." She launched into a theatrical retelling of her adventure, swinging her staff dramatically to mimic battle stances. She imitated the bandits' voices, threw in her own exaggerated sound effects, and even mimicked Nox's mighty roar, though it sounded more like a groggy yawn. "Oh, I almost forgot," she said. "I temporarily had turned Isaac into a tree to prevent him from doing anything rash. So, he might be rather grumpy when he returns." Her story was still unfolding when the sound of hooves drew their attention. From the edge of the nearby trees, Isaac appeared, astride his mount. Draped over the back of the horse was a massive, red-striped tusked beast. "Look what I found on the way back," he shouted with a grin. "A red-tail hog. Couldn't resist taking it down." He dismounted with a soft grunt and tossed his reins loosely over a hitching post. Vincent stepped forward, drawn by the commotion. As he neared the boar-like beast, he nodded slowly in approval. "That is indeed rare," he said, examining the creature from snout to tail. "A clean kill, too. It'll fetch a fine price at the next merchant camp." Lizyra, still holding her staff like a war trophy, piped up proudly, "That makes 2 victories tonight then." Nox let out a low, pleased rumble, chomping into the final steak Ifer had given him, then nosed his snout affectionately against Lizyra's side as if to second her claim. Isaac glanced at the hog and then back at Vincent. "Actually, I was thinking we cook it up for supper tomorrow. There's more than enough to feed everyone, and after weeks of dragon raptor steaks, I figured we could use a change before we forget what actual meat tastes like." With a grunt, he hoisted the massive boar over his shoulder and ascended one of the caravan ramps, vanishing into the carriage that housed most of their preserved food supplies. Vincent nodded, folding his arms. "Ah, well thought out. I'm sure the others will appreciate something different on their plates for once." He turned to the rest of the camp, his voice rising above the crackle of the fire and chatter of voices. "All right, everyone. We depart in 5 minutes. Make sure you've packed everything you need. Once we rendezvous with Osiris's team, we're heading west. Next stop, Vlad's party." He added with finality, "No stops until then. Let's move." From across the clearing, Gwen raised her fist enthusiastically. "Huzzah! It's been ages since our fellowship rode together without being scattered across 3 quests." Ifer, lounging with one leg propped on a crate, rolled her eyes and muttered with biting sarcasm, "Yay. Vlad. The horniest man alive. I'm simply brimming with excitement to hear his latest gems about magic wands and unsheathed daggers." Isaac emerged from the wagon ramp, dusting his hands off after securing the boar, his face lit with a mischievous grin. "Come now, he's not that bad. Vlad's got his quirks, sure, but he's loyal. And useful in a fight." "I seem to recall," Ifer replied coolly, "a time not too long ago where he ogled me through the crack of my cabin door while I was changing." Riley chimed in as she adjusted the strap on her satchel. "Yeah, well, you still leave your door cracked every single time you change. Maybe his wandering eyes are the price you pay for that desperate hope that someone's watching." Eyes narrowing, Ifer fired back without hesitation. "Hey. At least I don't leave the toilet stall door wide open like Theo, treating the rest of us to the symphony of his digestive sorrows every morning after a night of smoke and ale." From behind, Theo approached, reins in hand and brow furrowed. All right, rumpus time is over. Let's keep focused. We move now and stay sharp for predators, be they beast, man, or worse." Isaac secured the last of the crates in the wagon's lower compartment, then waved Theo over to introduce him to the new horse they'd acquired from the thieves. Theo raised a brow. "You stole a horse? That's a bit low for a so-called noble knight of Enos, isn't it?" Isaac clutched his chest theatrically, eyes wide. "Stole? Perish the thought. Lizyra merely obliterated their transport very politely, I might add. With their wagons reduced to rubble and no need for extra mounts, we simply liberated a steed. In fact, I'd say it was gifted to us in an unspoken treaty of mutual understanding." Theo chuckled, mounting the front of the lead carriage. "Well, we'll just make sure it doesn't talk to any patrols." Isaac sighed as he fastened the last strap. "As for knighthood," he muttered, more solemnly, "the kingdom fell before I ever could bask in the honor. All that remains of Enos now are its ghosts." For a moment, silence fell across the camp. The flickering bonfire reflected off armor and antler, metal, and fur, as the group quietly finished their preparations. Soon followed by the sound of boots on wood, reins being pulled taut, wheels creaking into motion. One by one, the caravan members climbed back into their wagons. Nox made his way up the ramp and lowered himself beside Ragnar and Ragnus, the dire wolves barely stirring as his bulk settled into the hay. Torches were dimmed and snuffed out, their dying embers hissing softly against the damp night air until only starlight remained. The wagons lurched forward. Wheels pressed shallow grooves into the softened earth, hooves finding a steady rhythm as the caravan eased back into motion. Quiet conversation faded, leaving only the creak of wood and leather until even that thinned, and the road swallowed the sound as they moved on through the dark.
As much as I'd like to do another chapter, I have to go to bed. And then we'll be back tomorrow morning with chapter 4. After 3 hours, we're only 4 chapters in. But of course, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my little story. And of course, Shark Punch 007, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate you checking out the stream. And until next time, have a good night.